Are you gonna on the TV screen? That's awesome. Okay.
Just for you, Neil.
Listen, thank you.
You're live.
Thank you.
Listen.
All right. It is 6 p.m. We're starting a little early today. I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting of the Board of Selectmen to order. We're here at the Public Safety Complex. Excuse my ugly glasses. And I just want to let you know this isn't dress down day for Julia. It is opening day for my Little League team. So they are playing and I intend to go. I am one of their coaches and I'm missing their first game, which stinks. But I intend to go visit them as soon as we're done.
You won't get coach of the year.
For this. All right. So the first things we have on the agenda are the consent items. There are 4 of them, and I will read them as per usual. The first one is to approve the meeting minutes from the regular meeting held on April 10th, 2023. The second one is a request from the Congregational Church to use the town common in conjunction with the townwide yard sale on May 20th from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. The third is request from the Congregational Church to put up signs on the roadway for their May 20th event. And the fourth is to close the warrant for the annual town meeting to be held on June 5th, 2023. Are there any objections?
So how can we close the warrant until we've looked at everything?
We should probably wait until after
Yes.
we look at things.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, I would also say that we need to remove the request from the Congregational Church to put up signs on the roadway as well. Only because putting up signs on the roadway I don't think is within our purview. So I think we just need to say that. We can't like approve it.
Would that go to the state?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So
make a motion to approve 1 and 2 under the consent items?
okay, excellent.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, so 3 and 4, we'll move right on to those for now. So, because there's no old business. So request from the Congregational Church to put up signs on the roadway. You saw the request that came through. You know, I think what this is, you know, those signs that they put up for the townwide yard sale, like the sequential signs or whatever,
Yeah.
right? Not within our purview. We've never said yay or nay on that, so I don't think that we need to approve that.
Is there somebody we have to check with? Because I'm on part of that committee for the barbecue or the.
Yeah, I don't believe there is.
Okay, I mean,
Yeah.
because Rutland's had them up,
Yep.
and I'm just saying, so if there's somebody to ask, we would like to do that, otherwise we're
I think
gonna
you're good.
proceed?
Yep,
Okay, thank you, just wanted to clarify, thank you.
I think you are all set.
Ask for forgiveness.
Pardon me?
Ask for forgiveness.
Well, yeah, okay, ask for permission too, but we'll go for forgiveness if we.
I can't give you permission, so.
There you go.
I will forgive you, though.
However, we do have the signs on the common that we would need to approve. So if anybody wants to make a motion for that piece of it.
Oh, yeah, I'd make a motion to approve the signs on the common itself.
Yep.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
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 And so those dates are from 5/6/23 to 5/20/23, so that's within our 2-week usual time frame. No issues there. Okay, perfect. So that's that. Get back over to the agenda. All right, so the other item is going to actually be held off until the end after we discuss our warrant articles. Okay. So under new business, first we have discussing uses for the remaining ARPA funds. Heather, do you happen to have a updated
Yes.
financial on that?
So I have to double check everything. I think the one online is probably the most up to date as well, but I do have her updated version as of, I don't know, 4 hours ago.
Okay.
So, sorry, Scott. I do have the most updated one as of 4 hours ago, and I have the one in front of me as well, and I believe they're both actually the same. So it looks like right now where we are is we have, let me just double check the 2 numbers over here. Let's see, unencumbered. So we actually have, her most recent number is actually slightly lower here. She has unencumbered at $7,923.98. She did not add the interest earned there, so I think that's why it's a little bit lower. The interest earned is actually $988, and previously it was $963. So I would say that the online version is probably even more updated because it has the interest in there totaling $8,887, but keep in mind, we need to set aside about $5,000 for a single audit.
Yep.
So that leaves us with about $3,887. Most of these projects are gonna be spent down. The ones we have on here that might be worth taking a look at are going to be the assistance to households, which still holds $36,800.52. To date, we've only expended $13,199. And the electronic sign still has about $10,235. And talking with Donna, there's just a little tiny bit of work that has left. So we should be able to actually move about 10,000 of that to any other purpose that we have. We just need to leave a couple $100 to finish the paint work.
Okay. So, let me just start making a note. So we have 3,000 essentially unencumbered if we take out the audit piece, and then roughly 10,000 from the signs. And then there's 36,000 left in assistance to households.
Is that 36 minus 13? Or was
So
that
that's
36?
40,000.
So we've got about, so we could take 20 from there and leave 16 from the assistance to household.
And I think Cindy Love was looking for
A little bit more for
a
the
little
food
bit for the
pantry.
food pantry as well. What is left in the remaining in the food pantry?
Food pantry
1,300.
has 1,385.
Okay, so she still hasn't spent that off yet.
No, but I think it's coming.
Okay. So, I know finance was looking for us to try and offset the budget somewhat with ARPA funds. Unfortunately, we can't do that, right? Because ARPA funds that's an exclusion to the usage of the ARPA funds. However, we could look at purchasing something that would then have money fall off of the budget in advance of next year. Any thoughts on how we would potentially do that? What item?
Can we think about something what's already got a project out there?
Yeah. So current projects that we have, I'm actually gonna look at yours because you have it up right now. We have West Street Water Main, the food pantry, senior center ramp and front steps have been completed. Online permitting is completed. Assistance to household school supplies. The EOC build-out is completed. Signs, Police Bridge Academy are done. Police cruiser, COVID test kits are taken care of. We have stormwater, West Street stormwater,
Which is in the budget.
which is in the budget, and MS4 stormwater compliance. So we actually have two stormwater lines, and we do have a stormwater line item in the budget. What is the amount of the stormwater
32 off the top of my head.
in the budget?
In the town's budget?
Yeah.
Either 32 or 34.
I had 36 in my head.
Oh, it might be 36. I know it's 30 something
Oh,
30, yeah.
because there's the drains on there.
Because that would be an easy move
That
if
would be an
we,
easy move.
Clean.
yep. Because if we're budgeting for stormwater,
MS4 is 36,800.
You're right.
hey, look at that, memory. So we could move some portion of that over, of the 40,000 that's really still currently pending. Does anybody want to make a motion, or do you
Well,
want to
if we
discuss?
moved like 20, not to pinch everything in the ARPA,
Mm-hmm.
but then relieve 20 in the town budget, that would be very logical, I think. I don't want to completely deplete the ARPA,
Yeah,
since there's some things that still haven't been completed on that yet.
But we're not taking any new projects on.
Right.
There's
We're
not,
not.
there's not going to be enough to do any projects.
So
Right.
would you guys be comfortable with 20 or 25?
I don't know, you probably could push it a little bit, right? Mark has a,
Everything we take
Mark.
off here,
Sorry,
take
it's not
here,
my place.
we're not taking from the stabilisation.
Right.
that's right. That's, I
I'd
mean,
rather,
and that's,
I'd rather be taking here than stabilisation.
I agree, because when, the more you take out of stabilization, it's gonna affect your bond rating and
It's
whatnot
never
for
gonna
the
go back
town. And I agree with Carol, you know, trying to get it back in there is gonna be a battle. So the more we can do here, the better. Go ahead, Mark.
Thank you. If I recall correctly, about 2 select board meetings ago, some discussion regarding ARPA funds was aired at one of those, at that previous meeting. Okay, and I spoke to the point of asking that you hit the pause button and that you not make any decisions until such time as the Finance Committee and the Capital Improvements Planning Committee made their reports, which are on the docket this evening. So I'm suggesting again that you not make any decisions until such time as the Finance Committee and the CIPC make their reports in an hour from now. If you waited for 2 weeks, 2 weeks ago, it seems to me that it makes sense to wait another hour until the presentations of both those committees are made.
I'm okay with waiting.
I'm fine
Yeah, I'm
with that.
fine with that. Yeah, that makes sense.
So why don't we do that? We've
Okay.
had a short discussion, but, so keep that in your brains, but we'll hear more on it in a few. Okay, the next item is to award the RFP for a 3-year trash collection to Pellegrino Trucking Company. So this went out as a bid process. We got 2 bids back, 3 bids total back. Pellegrino came in as the lowest. They are our current hauler anyways. The other bids, also, not only did they come in higher, but they also came in with some different contingencies that would need to come in as changes to the town, such as using toters and whatnot, which, would significantly impact our current trash handling, I guess you'd say.
Process.
I think we've got a really good relationship at the moment.
We do. I agree. Pellegrino does a great job. They
I'd
actually.
like make a motion to approve Pellegrino.
It's moving us along. I love it.
Gonna get to that baseball game.
All right. Is there a second?
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
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 I just want to say they've done a really good job.
They're
Yep.
working with us.
I've never had an issue with them.
Yeah, and they actually level funded there. They came in at the same.
So how
Prices
does,
last year, so.
how does that affect the budget numbers that are in there now?
They're already updated.
You've already updated
Yeah,
them?
I've already updated the revenue and the expense side
So
to
the-
reflect the addition of the contract for Pellegrino. So it actually lowered the initial numbers on both sides, right? So it's a wash.
Okay.
Yep.
But it lowered both because I was anticipating an increase
Yep.
and not a level fund number.
I noticed that they'd changed, but I didn't know if you'd taken that into account since we haven't voted on it, that's all.
And have you happened to look at our, from the trash fee that we're collecting right now, is that
No.
covering? Okay, so we'll have to just probably take another look at that at some point to make sure that we're covering it.
It should be-
Cheryl and I thought we would sit down, kind of break out the numbers, and then she'd report back to the Board of Health to figure
Okay.
out what you guys need to look at, if it's enough or not.
Yeah, okay. And just so that you're aware, the Board of Health did vote to recommend that Pellegrino be moved forward.
Okay.
No surprises there. Okay, correspondence. I don't have anything. Do you guys have anything? Nothing. Public comment?
I
Yeah.
have public comment. Could I just go first, please? If I may, just,
Niels, just stand up and
Well,
give me
I
your,
think everybody- I thought we were on track, that we were gonna be posting calendars on schedule and everything was great. I thought we hadn't missed a Monday in so many whatevers, that all of a sudden, I was here Monday night and realized there was not a meeting, but there was nothing on the electronic signs to keep it up to speed, so I knew what was going on. So then I went
Okay.
back to the house, and went on the line, went to the website, said, oh, it's tonight,
Yeah.
and it's joint, because I knew we, as CIPC, were coming for a joint meeting, but
right.
if we just could keep the process going, I would be so grateful.
We're gonna do
Does
the
it-
best we can, Neil. We were competing with a lot of signage this week, so we will work our best to find a way to incorporate it in.
Can that be like a slot that we allocate, though?
Why don't you just look on the website?
Well, because
then you have
sometimes
to
I'm
drive
just.
to town to have a
No,
look.
but like driving through town, it's like, oh, I gotta be there on Wednesday night. I could have been there on Monday night. It's one of the things that I've asked, I think you have 4 signs, 4 messages per cycle, correct? Can
Usually,
we
yeah.
allocate 1 or make 5 so that we would have the calendar and 4 others, or the calendar and 3
We have
others?
a policy that governs how the messages are on that sign, and it includes a prioritization.
Okay.
And not having that policy in front of me, I can't make any guarantees, because I don't recall exactly what the prioritization is, but I assume that town business is right up there.
Okay, I just remember that it was a living document, if I remember. We want to be able
Yep.
to modify it as
If we
the
think
need
there's a
arose.
need to
correct.
change it.
And I
Yep.
believe there were 4 messages that we were allowed when I sat through the beginning.
That's right.
So I may ask that you amend it to 5, and that you always allocate or slot 1 of them for the town calendar. Just the weekly count, I think that would be great, and I appreciate that. So with that, I
And
thank
the
you.
reason for the change was completely my fault,
Oh,
just so you know.
We mentioned that last
I was
month.
out of town, so.
all right, that's fine. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, Jeff, come on up.
But they're connected together. They're both signs are connected. So whatever goes on one goes on both.
You're making yourself awfully comfortable right there.
Yes.
Let me just check the microphone. Can everyone hear me?
Is it on? Is it green?
Good. All right. My name's Jeff Kent, 899 Pleasant Street. I'm here tonight to issue a prepared statement in which I will address the Select Board, those in attendance, and the viewing public in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 20, Paragraph G. This time I request to be recognized by the chair and that any questions or comments be held till the end of my statement. May I be recognized?
You may be recognized. You have the floor, Jeff.
My wife, Debbie Sage, and her six brothers and sisters were raised in Paxton by J.D. and Pip Sage at 2 Richards Avenue. They've been here for over 60 years. Debbie and I built our home on Pleasant Street in 1995, and after several military moves, became full-time residents. I myself am a U.S. Army officer who retired in 2014 at the rank of Colonel, pay grade 06, after a 30-year military career in service to our nation. I'm also an elected member of the Paxton Planning Board, and I serve as the town's veterans agent. I'm also a founding member and former member, chairman of the Capital Improvements Planning Committee. I'm here tonight to address the actions spearheaded by the former town administrator and the past and current select board in the formation and conduct of the American Rescue Act Committee, also known as ARPA. Furthermore, I'm here to express my concern regarding the evaluation and decision-making process used to expend the town of the town of Paxton's ARPA funded related to capital projects and expenditures. The citizens of Paxton received almost $1.5 million in ARPA funding, which almost $1 million was designated for capital projects. I'll provide a definition of capital projects and improvements later in my statement.
Jeff, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but do you have an idea of what kind of time frame we're looking at?
Probably about 30 minutes.
That's not
So-
the agenda.
Yeah, we can't do that. You have
Yeah.
about 5 minutes.
Yes, I can. Because there's no policy with the town of Paxton related to public session,
So the chair can set the time frame for public speakers.
okay? I'm going to finish my speech. You're going to let me finish my speech. I know what the Mass General Law states. 9 times in my military career, I raised my hand and swore to defend the Constitution of the United States, which includes those rights to me. So I think you can give me 30 minutes of time to make my statement.
So we don't have you built in for 30 minutes of time right now.
I'm going to continue reading. On October 11th, 2022, I was part of a group of well-informed and credentialed citizens that addressed this board regarding the formation and activities of the ARPA committee. Now, this meeting can be viewed on the Paxton Public Access TV video on demand website, but I just want to note that it's listed as 15 October. It should be 11 October. Now, we had valid and fact-based concerns, and we came to discuss the process, not the individual projects. Yet we were limited to 1 hour, and we were required to provide specific agenda items well in advance. Now, I've been in a lot of meetings and briefings in my Army career, and this was the first time I honestly can say I felt that I was dismissed, we were dismissed, and it was the first time where I was actually gavelled down, and in other words, told to shut up and move out. Quite frankly, I was offended by your gaveling action to silence us, as it was totally inappropriate and out of line. The perception by us, some in attendance, and many watching the video, is that we were a nuisance, a fly in your ointment, and that our concerns were not taken seriously, and the goal of the select board was to move on to the next agenda item as quickly as possible. The canned responses were off-putting. We have a difference of opinion. We made our decisions based on the current information on hand. We're proud of how quickly we expended the ARPA funding. The select board will take it under advisement, and we were elected by the people, are just some of the examples. Now, I was the last person to address the select board, and I spoke of the background and the reason for forming the CIPC, the objectives and the intent of the bylaw, and how the select board circumvented the process of reviewing, recommending, and improving capital projects. I concluded that you need to set a path forward to regain the trust and confidence in our elected officials. We expect our elected and our appointed officials to promote the principles of honesty, trustworthy, and transparency, both in word and deed. So, after this meeting, I made the determination that there was more we, the citizenry, could do to hold our elected officials accountable. So I took action, and I'll disclose that later in this statement. But before I move on to that, I want to affirm my military experience and credentials to those that are present here tonight, those that are watching live, and those that will watch this recording later on. You have those credentials and bona fides by the fact that you're select board. I think it's only fair that I talk about my background because it's relevant to why I'm here tonight. My operational specialty, U.S. Army specialty, is Special Forces, also known as Green Berets. I am a veteran of contingency, training, and combat operations in Eastern Europe, Sub-Saharan Africa, and the Southwest Asia. But I also served in functional area assignments that are relevant to why I'm here tonight, that allowed me to acquire the technical skill sets outside the typical Special Forces trade craft, tactical trade craft. It's always been my goal to encompass these skill sets and leadership expertise to continue to serve the town of Paxton, to volunteer my experience and talents so that our government can be more efficient and effective while still maintaining our rural charming character. So the two positions I want to point out is, number one, is I served as the Chief of Staff for Force Development and Integration for United States Army Special Forces Command, where I led a staff of both military and civilian personnel to develop, coordinated, marketed, and executed force structure, force modernization, and strategic planning, programming, and budgeting requirements with the Department of the Army and the United States Special Operations Command. Sounds similar to what CIPC does. So in layman's terms, we were the staff proponent that designed, created, and fielded the future combat-ready forces for our nation. My staff and myself were the commanding general's lead for the stationing, manning, training, equipping, facilities, and operational budgets of 5 active duty and 2 National Guard Special Forces group, comprising of a force of over 15,000 personnel. The other assignment that's relevant is that I also served as a Command Inspector General. both in the United States and in a combat zone. I was a personal advisor to the Commander General, providing a continuing assessment on the state of the economy, discipline, efficiency, morale, training, esprit de corps, and combat readiness of the military organization. Again, I led both the military and civilian staff responsible for performing IG functions of assistance, inspections, and investigations. I was the eyes and ears of the commanding general. I provided assistance and complaint resolutions to our service members. I conducted both regulatory and compliance inspections, and I also conducted investigations into allegations of improprieties and misconduct. So now I'm going to reveal why I'm here and why I'm making this public address. On October 28th, 2022, I filed a formal complaint with the State Ethics Commission.
I understand that you want to be heard. I'm more than happy to put you on an agenda so that you can be heard for the appropriate time that you want to be heard for. However, as the chair of the Select Board here in the town of Paxton, I am allowed to set the amount of time available to a resident for their public comment. You've exceeded the time, and so at this point I'm going to ask you to leave.
No. Call law enforcement.
Sir, they're here. It's time to slip.
Okay.
Please let me know when you're available, when you'd like to get onto a future agenda. I'd be happy to accommodate
I cannot
you.
believe this is happening. This man has served his country, defended this country for your right,
You two are good with this?
for your right to stand
Can you
there
speak?
and have the
I
positions
can't.
that you have, and you will not let him speak? I hope you are fully aware of what took place in Southborough, Massachusetts, when a resident was tabled or taken out.
I am fully
You are
aware.
opening this town up to an awful lot of legal action that may be coming.
Jeff, I apologize.
It's not to
Carol?
apologize, stand up for him.
I'm not the chair.
You're one.
I'm one.
It takes one. Say no.
I'm not comfortable with.
Carol, stand up for him.
Can I just say one little thing? Why didn't you just ask to come on the agenda? Right, I mean, I don't understand.
I don't have to do that. This is a public session.
No, we're not even in a
I know
public
what's in the
session
Mass
yet.
General Law, and just because you disagree with what I'm saying,
I
don't
don't even know if I
disagree at
disagree
all.
with you.
Yeah,
She does.
I haven't heard what you're saying yet, so I
I'm
don't know
to
that
the
I
point.
disagree
I
with you.
filed a formal ethics complaint against you three. And I'm going to reveal the allegations, the facts behind it, and they are facts. They're not opinions. They're facts.
But why do that deserves
Let
a
him
meeting?
be heard.
You just asked me to talk, and then you told me to.
What's
Let
the
him
rush?
finish.
You're being paid by the hour?
This is
You have to go
what a
home?
miscarriage of justice.
You're serving the town.
You keep your
If
voices
this
down, you
meeting
sound
takes
like
till
fools. Well,
midnight,
we
you
don't
can
have
stay till
microphones.
midnight. I went to a million city council meetings
We
in
don't have
Worcester, and they ran till they were over. And he has the floor. And like he said, there is no rule that says he has to talk 5 minutes.
And you recognized him as having the floor.
I did, but public comments are typically limited to a short period of time, not 30 minutes. We don't have 30
Well, now
minutes
we
set
could be
aside
longer
for
than
him.
that because of this interruption. He might have been done in 15.
I have no problem with listening to what Jeff has to say. If there's something against us, then there's something against us. I don't think we ever do anything that we generally think before we say something. So I've got no problems with listening to him. I've had utmost respect for Jeff. Not that he's had any respect for me more lately, but I've had utmost respect for him for a while. So carry on.
I agree.
For mine.
Okay.
May I
So
continue?
the board
Thank you.
has decided that you can carry on, so I'll allow it.
Sorry, Julia.
That's okay.
So, again, to recap, on October 28th, 2022, I filed a formal complaint with the Massachusetts State Ethics Commission.
Can you give me that date again, please, Jeff?
October 28th, 2022.
I haven't heard anything.
No?
So I'm here tonight to reveal the subjects of the complaint, specific of the allegations and associated violations of both Massachusetts general law and Town of Paxton bylaws. And there's 4 subjects of the complaint. First one is Mr. Peter Bogren, the former Select Board Chair.
It would have been nice if you'd have let us know that it was. Can I just say, because we don't like talking about people when they're not here. So it'd have been nice to be able to have invited Peter.
Okay, fine. Mr. Peter Bogren, former Select Board Chair, Mrs. Julia Pingatori, former Select Board member and current Select Board Chair and spouse of Mr. Michael Pingatori, Chief of the Paxton Fire Department, Chief of Emergency Medical Services, and Director of Emergency Management. Mrs. Carol Riches, former Town Administrator and current Select Board member, and Mr. Kurt Hewells, current Select Board member.
I'm married to Paul Riches.
Supporting documentations that I used to frame my allegations were the Select Board meeting minutes and video recordings, the American Rescue Plan Act ARPA Committee meeting minutes, Town of Paxton bylaws, Massachusetts Conflict of Interest law and the Conflict of Interest annual training requirements, conflict of interest disclosures filed with the town clerk, and then finally, Mass General Law 268A and 930 Code of Massachusetts Regulation. So the first allegation is that Mr. Bogren, Mrs. Pingatori, Mr. Hewells, and Mrs. Riches formed and sanctioned the ARPA Committee on July 19th, 2021, and subsequently appointed Mrs. Pingatori to said committee. This is in violation of Mass General Law 268A, Section 21, which states, and I quote, "No member of a municipal board, municipal commission, or board shall be eligible for appointment or election by the members of such commission or board to any office or position under the supervision of such commission or board." That's this one right here. Pretty straightforward. Furthermore, Mrs. Pingatori was appointed chair of this committee, which is in violation of Mass General Law 268A regarding appearance of conflict, which states, acting in a manner that would make a reasonable person think they can be improperly influenced is prohibited. So in simple terms, you, Mrs. Pingatori, served as a chair of a committee that reports to, is under the supervision of the Select Board, which eventually you were both the ARPA chair and the Select Board chair simultaneously.
Isn't there a special provision for towns
No.
under 5,000?
No.
When I think you might find there is.
No, there's not. Allegation number 2.
Try looking.
Mr. Bogren, Mrs. Pingatori, Mr. Hewells, and Mrs. Riches violated Mass General Law 30 Alpha, open meeting law, and Mass General Law 268A, appearance of conflict related to the formation and conduct of the ARPA Committee. Here are the facts and the optics that go along with it. The committee members are town paid employees and/or department heads, 3 which do not reside in Paxton. The Finance Committee and CIPC were excluded from participation. The 2 committees who make finance and resourcing recommendations to the Select Board and the citizenry during annual town meetings and special town meetings. Additionally, there were no appointed citizens from the general public, which is counter to the standard practice of having townspeople serving as members at large. The committee had an appearance, again optics, of a Town of Paxton department meeting. ARPA meetings were held during business hours, typically 10 a.m., which reliably ensured that the public attendance was eliminated or best constrained. It is also important to note that none of these meetings were video recorded. This is counter to what is now an established practice to video record meetings where resourcing, financial, and budgetary recommendations and/or decisions are discussed and voted on. Allegation number 3. Mr. Bogren, Mrs. Pingatori, Mr. Hewells, and Mrs. Riches violated our CIPC bylaw by approving capital projects at the exclusion of the CIPC and the FICOM in regards to budget formulations and consideration, and most importantly, our citizens. To paraphrase the CIPC bylaw, which was approved on March 15, 2013, the committee shall solicit, review, recommend capital projects and improvements that are purchased or undertaken at intervals of not less than 5 years, have a useful life of at least 5 years, and cost over $10,000. However, the committee approved and appropriated $996,500 just shy of $1 million towards 9 capital projects, including $750,000 for a pumper tanker truck for the fire department.
Which went to the capital.
Which was number 1 on the capital.
It was on the capital list, it went to the capital, it's in
That's
the
this
minutes.
right here.
As a warrant article,
Look,
Excuse me?
as a warrant article.
It was Mark.
look, I'm not here to argue the worthiness
Wait, no.
or need of the projects, but
Okay.
rather highlight the violation of our established process and procedures to solicit, review, recommend, and ultimately vote on capital expenditures.
Donna, I think there's somebody trying to get in the door. It looks like they might not be able to get in.
The ARPA funding was granted to us, the people, not the select board or our committee comprised of town employees. You effectively removed our voice, kept it out of the proper forum, such as the annual or special town meeting. And again, this does not promote the themes of trust and transparency in government. Allegation number 4. In addition to the CIPC bylaw violation, on March 9th, 2022, Mr. Bogren, Mrs. Pingatori, Mr. Hewells, and Mrs. Richards violated Mass General Law 268 Alpha and CMR 930 as it applies to conflict of interest and conflict of interest disclosures. Now, it was at this meeting, the Select Board voted by a 2-to-1 vote to commit $750,000 towards the procurement and purchase of the new pumper tanker truck, an item that does meet the definition of a capital project. Now, I will address the key highlights with time hacks. From the meeting video recording that is posted on our town website, because the meeting minutes do not reflect the true context of the dialogue exchanges. So the ARPA presentation started at 5:31, and Mrs. Pingatori was the first briefer. And they were discussing items on the project list. But she did not disclose publicly that she is the chair of the ARPA committee, vice chair of the BOS, and spouse of the chief of the fire department, emergency medical services, and director of emergency management. The capital project, the pumper tanker truck discussion, starts at 25 minutes, 58 seconds, and ends at 48:30. Mr. Travis Tebow was the next briefer. He was introduced as the director of DPW, but there was no public disclosure that he is the vice chair of the ARPA committee. Likewise, Chief Michael Pingatori, he came in, he was the last briefer, was introduced by Mrs. Pingatori at 28 minutes and 37 seconds for a question and answer session. But again, there was no public disclosure of the relationship between Mrs. Pingatori, both the BOS vice chair and ARPA chair, and their personal relationship. The Q&A session centered on the capital project and recommended funding. Now, here's where it gets to the meat of the argument. At 48:50, the Select Board entered a motion by Mr. Hewells and seconded by Mr. Bogren to discuss the purchase of the pumper tanker truck with ARPA funds for $750,000. The discussion commenced. Going back to what Mr. Love was about ready to say, at 1 hour, 5 minutes, and 28 seconds, Mr. Mark Love, the CIPC chairman and Finance Committee vice chair, was recognized. Now, I'm paraphrasing. This is not verbatim, but Mr. Love stated that the CIPC is in favor of the capital project and forwarded it to the Board of Selectmen as a warrant article for presentation at the annual town meeting. Note, that didn't happen. It wasn't presented as a warrant article, and that is a violation of our CIPC bylaw. At 1 hour, 7 minutes, and 30 seconds, Mr. Bogren ends the discussion, calls for a vote with a roll call vote, and this is how it went. This is where it gets interesting. Mr. Bogren voted yes, but Mr. Hewells voted no. Now, I'm paraphrasing, but you can go back and watch this on video on demand. It's there. Mr. Hewells objected because he stated no because her husband is the fire chief. Mr. Bogren then came back and said, the State Ethics Commission says that since there's no financial gain, she can vote on issues dealing with the fire department. I disagree with that statement, but that's what he said. Mr. Bogren stated that Mrs. Pingatori needed to cast a tie-breaking vote. She then cast a tie-breaking vote, voting in the affirmative, and then at 1 hour, 10 minutes, and 20 seconds, the BOS moved on to the next agenda item. So, my analysis, those are the 4 allegations. So, back to Mr. Tebow and Chief Pingatori. Their failure to disclose their roles and relationships was not egregious, and I believe not ill-intended. I repeat, I do not question their honesty, integrity, and I hold both of them in extreme high regard. But it should be remembered by anyone that addresses a public venue that irregardless of how well they're known or perceived to be known, one must formally introduce who they are, what their role is when speaking at a public meeting in the spirit of transparency and full disclosure. Mr. Hughes, you were absolutely correct that Mrs. Pingatori must recuse herself. Although Mr. Bogren makes a vague reference to 268 alpha and financial gains, he makes no reference that addresses appearances, self-dealing and nepotism, and loyalty. As it relates to conflict of interest, Mrs. Pingatori was required by Mass General Law and Code of Massachusetts regulation to identify herself and her relationship to Chief Pingatori, and was obligated to recuse herself from the vote for the following reasons. Avoid any appearance of conflict, self-dealing, and nepotism. Let me repeat this. Avoid appearance of conflict, self-dealing, and nepotism. This is covered extensively in our conflict of interest laws and also the state of Massachusetts conflict of interest online training module that most in this room, including myself, do and complete annually. Here's mine from this year, last year, I can go back years. As long as I've been holding positions where this is required, I've been doing this. But Mrs. Pingatori argued, going back to the 11 October 2022 meeting, she indicated she did recuse herself from voting on this capital project. This was back in October 2022, even though the ARPA meeting minutes reflect that the vote was all in favor. Now, go back to that meeting, 11 October. This exchange starts at 30:30 and ends at 30:24. And the context of the discussion was Mr. Love was pointing out that the meeting minutes didn't reflect accurately the vote. So, and it was all in favor. That's what the meeting minutes stated. And then at 30:52, Mrs. Pingatori stated, I did not vote for that. A couple seconds paused, I recused myself. And then at 31:17, when confronted again, the issue was questioned, Mrs. Pingatori had the vice chair, Mr. Tebow, and Mrs. Riches verbally state, and you can hear it on the video, that she did in fact recuse herself. So, we've established something here. So it begs the question, if it was necessary to recuse yourself as ARPA chair, would it not be reasonable to recuse yourself as select board voting member? Again, ARPA meeting minutes do not reflect this recusal, and the select board disbanded the ARPA committee on January 9th, 2023. Mission accomplished. You obligated the ARPA funding as quickly as possible and before anyone could take notice and ask the tough questions. Again, great optics. But here is what is the most egregious action I found out during my fact finding. I found out in the 10 years Mrs. Pingatori has served on the select board, there has only been one disclosure filed with the town clerk, and that was to serve on the town administrator search committee. And that's this one right here. Received and dated by the town clerk, January 11, 2022.
That's incorrect.
But what is true? It's date stamped right
I
here.
have filed at least one other one.
But it's But in a records request, this was what was provided to me. But what is truly shocking is that Mrs. Pingatori never filed a disclosure of a parent's conflict of interest as required by Mass General Law 268 Alpha, Section 23, Paragraph 3B. That's this form right here. Appearance of conflict, appearance of favoritism and influence, filed with the town clerk. But I did find correspondence from 2013 from the State Ethics Commission General Counsel, which directed that she abstain from participating in all matters in which her husband, who is a firefighter and a director of emergency management, has a financial interest, and furthermore, file a public written disclosure of the fact that your husband holds 2 paid town positions. Now it's 3. Since there's no disclosures filed with the town clerk, it prompts the question, in the past 10 years, how many times did Mrs. Pingatori abstain from voting on fire department, EMS, emergency management matters as it relates to salaries and compensation, labor agreements, hiring actions and performance appraisals, annual budgets, purchase services, supplies, and equipment? I'm confident the answer is never.
That's not true.
It's not true.
Well,
Not at all.
I put in a records request with the town clerk, and that's what was provided to me.
And there's been change in town clerks in the last few years.
Yeah.
So it could be
And who was the town administrator back then that should be following simple training management practices and making sure that all that's
The
following
town
correct?
clerk was also elected at that time and didn't report to the town administrator.
Well,
Anything else for me,
I've already
Jeff?
made
Come
my
on.
So the
I've
question
finished that job
is,
now.
how do you feel about this situation? Where do we go from here? I can't comment on the formal investigation, and the question's not directed at you. As I'm stating right now, I've already made up my mind. But this is to my fellow townspeople. I laid out the facts, and it's a personal decision that you all listening or sitting here tonight need to make. And to quote Thomas Paine, "He who dares not offend cannot be honest." So here's my honest feedback. Based on 30 years of experience of mentoring, counseling, teaching, training, performance appraisal, officer reports, NCO reports, and so forth. And this is based on my core values and convictions. The bottom line, Select Board violated our CIPC bylaw. Now, there's no way of going backwards, and I'm not asking you to go backwards.
I don't agree with that one bit.
Again,
Because I was at the Capitol meeting when I presented that. And there was minutes produced.
Okay.
And the chair at the time asked that they be changed, and the clerk refused.
Bottom line, the Select Board violated our CIPC bylaw. There's no way of going backwards. I'm not asking to go backward, but we cannot, and we, the citizens, will not allow this to happen again. Now, if this was a military organization, I am confident my allegations would be substantiated, and the directing authority, more than likely, would take punitive action. Punishment could range from anything from a letter of reprimand to a negative performance appraisal or relief of duties and reassignment. But needless to say, your career chances for promotion, assignments to positions of greater responsibility would be over. You'd have gone as far as you could go. Now, we citizens could request that you 3 tender your resignation or commit not to run for
Not a
re-election.
chance.
But I'd venture to say that your answer or your ego would be no. However, we do have options. We, the people, can initiate a citizen's petition in accordance with our town bylaws for recall elections, or we could do something as, I wouldn't say passive, but we can withdraw our support for your candidacy for future select board elections and actively participate to ensure your re-election bids fail.
Good.
Now, again, honesty. This is not personal, this is professional. So take it for what it is. Mr. Bogren's not holding elected office, but be mindful that he, as the select board chair, oversaw the establishment and conduct of the ARPA committee of said activities. So I won't support his future run for select board. Now, Mrs. Pingatori, your actions are truly grounds for dismissal. Your failure to follow simple principles and
I think
rules
we've heard enough.
of disclosure is counter to the
I think
themes
we've
of
had enough.
transparency and accountability, and leads to my lack of trust.
Are you nearly done, Jeff?
I'm almost done. I've got 3 pages. I'll run through this real quick.
Might as well just let him air it out.
May I remind you, although you were elected, you ran unopposed, so you were selected.
I did not.
That's not correct.
In the meantime, you need to file a notice of disclosure with the town clerk immediately and refrain from voting on any matters related to the Paxton Fire Department, emergency medical services, and emergency management.
As she has done in the past.
They're not on file. Now to address Mrs. Richards, former town administrator and winners of last year's election. Your election was not an overwhelming majority. You only won by 68 votes.
Yeah, but I won.
337 to 269. Yeah, you won, but hardly a mandate.
I
But
won
I
the
am
person.
totally flabbergasted by your lack of knowledge of town bylaws, Mass General Law, and Code of Military Regulation as it rules governing conflict of interest. Or was your action deliberate for a hidden agenda? Regardless, your actions or lack of there confirmed to me that your performance as a town administrator was marginal at best, and the trend continues as a select board member.
Oh, that's
Mr.
not
Hughes,
fair. That's not
I
fair,
voted
Jeff.
for you 3 years with the optimism that you would bring a balance to the board with a fiscal conservative philosophy and moral courage to say no, especially when it's not a popular position. I also look forward to this year, where you would have been serving as the select board chair. So I question why you did not prevent Mrs. Pingatori from voting on pumper tanker truck. You were on solid grounds.
You were at the meeting. I vehemently opposed it, and I was completely shut down. And not because I didn't support the pumper, because it was on the CICP warrant, but
The vote
Go
would
ahead.
have been 1-1 because she couldn't have voted.
it was 1-1.
That's why she voted.
Peter voted yes, I voted no.
She had to recuse herself. She couldn't vote.
That's your opinion, Jeff.
No,
That's
it's
let's
a
be
fact.
clear.
It's
That's
your opinion.
No, it's a fact.
But, go ahead, I understood.
It would have been an abstention,
Yeah.
motion fails, then you could have pursued going to annual town warrant,
Which
the
is
proper
exactly-
venue. But honestly, and again, this is not personal,
No,
please.
I don't take it personally.
It's at the town caucus where you really lost my support. You made two comments that I'll paraphrase. One, you're still learning on the job, and there's more to learn, and things here in Paxton move slow. And I just felt you're not fired up about running for reelection. I really sense that, Kurt. And it just tells me that you don't want the job, you're not actively campaigning for the position or so forth. But that's an opinion. It's not a fact, it's an opinion. But using the word slow doesn't apply to the concept of what I call deliberate planning and detailed planning and the efficient execution of town services. That's why I voted for you. That's why I was hoping you'd come on board and do those great things. But yet the select board acted so fast with the ARPA spending. Even though we had through December 24, 31st of December 24 to obligate the funding, and December 31st, 2026 to expend it. So, still learning on the job, should only take 6 months, a year at the best. But here's where you really lost me, Kurt. Here's where you really lost me. You should have taken the chair this year. And it's just the military and me, anyone who shies away from assuming positions of greater responsibility and authorities, when they refuse to do that, in other words, you decline to take the gavel.
He did not refuse.
It's the equivalent of,
He
he's
didn't
not the
get
chair,
voted.
Carol.
He
He's
didn't
not-
get voted.
He's not the chair. It's the equivalent of someone in the military refusing to accept the guide on command, so,
So can I ask you a question?
here.
When I came on, it was during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We're a 3-person board, 3 persons, which means not to violate Mass General Law. I can't call Carol. I can't call Julia. I can't say, what's the process here? How does this work? I have to call Donna, or I have to call whoever the town administrator is. It's not like a 5-person board where you have a mentor. And I'm not opposed to a 5-person board at all. Because when your first year on the board, you're drinking from the fire hose and you have to figure it out for yourself. It's very, very difficult. It's like you sending a young recruit into war and saying, just can't train you because I don't want to violate the ethics. So, yeah, I was a little slow getting up to speed. And I will be happy to talk about all the things that I've been working on, and all the things and changes that are coming. And I don't take back the fact that change happens slow. We've been trying to change the telephones at the town hall, and the pushback has been unbelievable because it's different. And you should know as a trainer that when someone sees something new and they're used to doing something a certain way, there's a learning curve and there's pushback and it takes time. So I'll give you back the
Appreciate
floor.
that response back, and I'll take that in.
And again, call me, we'll have a conversation anytime.
Okay. I'm done. Let me just make my concluding statement. In conclusion, regardless of the outcome of the ethics investigation, you three have lost my confidence and trust to continue to serve on the select board. And I'm hoping through this broadcast, it's my intent to open the eyes of others to go to these meetings, go to these video recordings, and review what's going on, because sunlight is the best disinfectant. I'll leave it with this. Share 2 leadership principles that I learned early on in my military career, which serve me well today and I believe in. Leaders are people who do the right thing, even when no one is looking. And just because it's legal doesn't mean it's right. I'll provide a copy of my statement as an attachment to the meeting minutes. I yield my time back. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Okay.
Can I just say, it's very difficult to defend yourself when when you're on the spot and you can't start rummaging for all the Mass General Law.
It's easy to defend right.
I'm talking about this evening, Jeff. Can we now continue?
We can continue. So the next thing I have on the meeting agenda is a budget discussion, and this is joint with Finance and Capital. I know I can see some members of Capital here. I have at least one member of Finance. If you guys can come forward, we'll start.
So, point of clarification, is it a joint meeting with finance and then a joint meeting with capital, or is it a joint meeting with finance and capital?
I think it's a joint party.
I think we can have everybody open their meetings at the same time and handle it all at once. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 members of Capital. I guess that puts Mark in kind of a tough spot, because is he here, can he open 2 meetings at the same time?
No, I don't think I can.
So-
And I don't have a quorum for one of
Why don't we start with Capital then, since I think do you have a quorum for Capital?
I respect that suggestion, but I think it might be actually easier to get through finance.
Oh, okay. So are you not expecting any other members?
No.
I just want to be respectful of if anybody else would be able to arrive.
Any others.
Okay, so if you're not going to need to open a finance committee meeting because you're not going to have a quorum, then we might as well just allow Capital to open theirs. And then you can start with finance if you want.
Okay. So can I open the, do I need a motion to open the capital improvement planning committee?
As the chair, you can just say you've opened it.
Second?
Second. Yep.
Discussion? Nope. We're open.
Excellent. All right, so the first thing we have on here is a budget discussion. So, Mark, if you don't mind, I'd like to give you the floor to give us a little summary of where we're at.
It's actually in front of you right now, and I have hard copies for anybody that has a hard time reading that. And Heather, thank you very much for doing this for me. And while you can see the page right here, it's a half of page. It's an 8.5, 11 by 11 piece of paper. I can't believe I'm going to try to put 4 months and hour after hour after hour of budget meetings into a perfect soundbite, which I'm not. But I think this particular one schedule is going to tell everything that you need to know. And that is that, and I'll hold up for the camera. This is one of our particular budget workbooks that we go through about 6, 8, 10, 12 of these a year. There's 52 cost centers. There's all manner of information. And all of that is line 1 up there. That after we received all the budgets, after we interviewed all the department heads that we wanted to come before us, and some that may have wanted to come before us and make their own presentation, we had a daunting task of a $444,397 budget. There are 3 or 4 of us that have been on the Finance Committee for a number of years. Rich Fenton, current chair, being one, and myself, I think the second longest serving member, never, ever saw a budget deficit of that particular magnitude. And we basically, I think, happily and for the first time this year, took to the fact that you can't balance a budget on the backs of budget cuts. So we had always tried to think that this is a two-legged stool. There's the revenue side, and then there's the expenditure side. And I want to give credit where credit is due on this page, and I think it belongs in 4 places, not the first of which is the second bullet. The current town administrator took it upon herself to look at local revenues, which, if I can interject a personal item, I had long since said that we had drastically under budgeted. In many instances, we budgeted the same local revenue number for 3 years in a row, which is just unheard of. And to the town administrator's credit, she dug deep. Fortunately, she found a miscalculation, which is even better. And our local revenues took a huge bump to the tune of $114,000 to reduce our budget deficit. The second credit goes to the department heads. I don't know how willingly or how reluctantly they did, but there was a meeting with department heads and the town administrator, and they made a sacrifice. I think that each one of them made a compelling case to us when they presented their budgets, but they went back and sharpened their pencils and came up with $108,000 of budget cuts, which I'm sure was very painful, but welcome and received by us. So that gave us a budget deficit still of $221,000 and some change, and that's when the Finance Committee, again, in conjunction with the town administrator, and this is where I want to give the Finance Committee kudos, we looked at everything. There was no sacred cows. There was nothing immune from our thorough review. We had a long discussion both on the evening of April 19th and April 24th, and we came up with another $98,000, a combination of increased revenue, in particular the ambulance fund, and fortuitously a decrease in employee benefits and some other cuts. So then we came across a decision to reduce the budget or increase the revenue by another $98,000. So we're going in the right direction. We're at $122,000 deficit. And that's when I think a good thing, Kirk may have actually alluded to this a minute ago, we're trying to make a transition of some budget changes. It was the equivalent of making sausage. It wasn't pretty, it was messy, It didn't work exactly according to Hoyle, but I think it's a big step in the right direction. But in the process, there seems to be a little bit of discrepancy between the Finance Committee and the town administrator, which I think is probably 24 hours away from being resolved. But we took the most conservative, worst-case approach, in which case it's not resolved, and it doesn't favor the budget, so we ended up with a budget deficit, which we're presenting to you this evening, quite frankly, of $140,000. Heather, if you can scroll back, I wanted to give 4 bouquets. I think I gave one to the town administrator, the town departments, and the finance committee, but in that line right there, kudos to the public. I don't recall as many from the public attending our finance committee meetings, and none of whom were bashful. They expressed their concerns and their positions on several. In fact, there was about $43,000 that we were thinking about cutting, and good, strong arguments were given not to cut it. So thanks to them, and I think that bodes well for the future for them to come and know more about the budget, participate in the budget. But now we scroll down, we're at 122 and, 140, and that's where we hit the pause button. And that's why we're here in front of you this evening. There's nothing more to cut in the budget, and we're still at $140,000 deficit. So there are 4 options available to us at the bottom of the page, and one of which is ARPA funds, which I'll talk about in a minute. The other is reluctantly to go to the stabilization fund. We'd like to take as little as possible, but if that's how we have to balance the budget, you can see the 140 is the top amount that we'd be willing to go, but that would fully balance the budget. But we're holding off because we don't know what the Wachusett Regional School District is going to do. And I have information as old as 24 hours, having attended a meeting last evening where I asked a question and I was told maybe a little, maybe a lot, maybe nothing. So that was my answer, but I couldn't dollarize that, so I put it up there under TBD. I think that there's an interest in coming back to the towns in adjusting the assessment. But there's some moving pieces in terms of reports not having been submitted, excess and deficiency not having been certified, state numbers not being finalized. What's the appetite of the new administrator, superintendent? What's the appetite of the school committee? Not that it matters, but I spent 10 minutes putting in my pitch for a lot. Because I think there's $700,000 in play. And if Paxton got 10% of that, then the deficit shrinks by $70,000. But Heather wouldn't let me put $70,000 in there. I wouldn't want to be guilty of doing it and find out, oh God, that didn't work the way we wanted to. But I think just as important of all of this page is the last number. We don't want an override. And to get to the 140 that we're at right now, town services can still be provided, town departments can still function. Nobody lost their job. Raises in accordance with COLA and step increases were there. And the taxpayers are not having to carry the load by evidence of our zero. I think if the Board of Selectmen sent it back to us that it would be an override, I think it would fail unanimously at the Finance Committee. So we think the answer is in the 3 numbers above it. Some ARPA funds, some stabilization funds, and everyone go to church or temple for the next 2 weeks and hope that Wachusett Regional comes forward with us. I think earlier in the evening, I don't want to speak to anybody, but I thought Carol said that we couldn't use ARPA funds. Our opinion is you could. Your opinion might be that you can't. I think we'd need the experts to come to the table and tell us whether we can. I have an understanding that some towns are doing some things with their ARPA funds such that it converts to free cash, in which case it can be used as a budget balancer. So we're not sitting here saying we know everything about that. We're here saying, let's find out what the answer is about that from the experts to see whether or not some of that money could be funded. So if 20 or 40 came to us in the way of that budget deficit, and the school committee comes with 70, then we only need to hit the stabilization fund for 50, not for 140. Currently, it's at $441,000. There probably would be some that don't want to spend any of it. Our position is it's at 441, it should be at $1 million. So then the question is, well, why are you going in the other direction? And the point is that 441, taking 140 out of it's going to do us a lot more good in use than letting it sit there and use it as a placeholder and hope that the Economic Development Committee going forward can generate some revenue. A number of other things that we thought about and suggested this year, which didn't come to fruition, would be back on the table next year. Some of the cuts that we took a pause on this year may not survive next year, but the help that we need this year is in those last 4 bullets right there. So that's, I just summed up about 15 meetings, maybe 60 hours, and 4 months of work, and that's where our budget is. So don't know what to say or to ask, but I think that's the opera projects, and the reason we came up with 20,000 is that it seemed to us that the electronic signs were done, so maybe there's $10,000 available there. There's $8,000 that's left. Maybe you take a revisit of the assistance to household, you cobble together $4 grand. I would say to you personally, and as a finance committee member, I think it would be an enormous symbolic gesture if something came forward from ARPA to help the budget. But we don't control the ARPA funds, you do. We control the budget, and we need $140,000 worth of help. So, that ought to sum it up, Heather?
I think so. I assume that the board wants to go back to revisit the ARPA conversation first, but then I have just a brief slideshow that just breaks down the budget with the revenues and expenses for people at home that I can whip through pretty quick in case you guys want to go through any of the details of the budget.
So I think we want to put off the ARPA conversation until after Capital makes their presentation. I believe that was the request that was made. Stop me if I'm wrong.
Yep.
So if you want to go ahead into yours,
Sure.
that's fine. Yep.
It seems long, but I won't spend a lot of time unless there's questions. Oh, good, it works. Very excited. All right, so a couple objectives that I know we've worked closely with FinCom on: retain all staffing levels and current staff, provide base salary increases consistent across the board, and enhance transparency, right? So we worked to consolidate department services into one related department when it came up, pulled out all non-union wages to show departmental structure and true costs of those employees, and excluded and non-excluded debt were broken out separately. It also ties back in the revenue and makes those of us who look back and forth a little less nutty. Revenues. So conservative number on new growth, building permits are still low. State aid numbers updated to most recent House figures. Local receipts reviewed past couple of years, as Mark had stated, looked at the trends and tried to get those numbers based on this year's numbers the best we could get them. And additional funds, this budget uses 100% of our certified free cash, uses less than 140K in operating, and the hope is, as Mark said, reducing the number more based on the increases or the decreases in the school assessment. Revenue factors, this year we had about 150,000 less in free cash than we did last year, and our new growth is stagnant and low. It's not doing a lot. Tax levy, so here's just a breakdown here. Again, we went over this when we did the review of the forecast back in the fall. But you're looking at tax levy numbers. New growth estimate for this year is 75,000 as presented to us by the assessors with the information that they have before them. You have the debt, the road exclusion fund, so that's the money the town decided to raise a number of years ago, goes up by 2.5% every year, and you see that offset in the expense line, and then your overrides and less overlay. And the less overlay number, I do have it on the side, but it's the 5-year average. That's why the number is what it is, and it may seem a little bit higher. State aid numbers, so these are the most up-to-date numbers on the House numbers. The things that are bold are things that actually changed from a few weeks ago when it was just the governor's budget, and the overall difference between the top bold, which was the unrestricted and the veteran blind elderly exemption, actually went down by just over $3,000. The library number went down as well, but since we don't use that in our budget and we just kind of wash it out, you see it come in and go out at the same time. And the state assessments stay the same from the governor's budget to House budget. Local receipts, you see the numbers here, so some things go up a little bit, some things go up a little bit more, it just depends. Charges for services for trash fees look a little bit higher, but again, remember that's based on the full cost of all the contracts related to the trash, including the I think it's like $5,000 for billing service, and that number is a complete wash with the expense. So what you see in the revenue side for trash, you see it in the expense side. Fees, rental, all of those pieces there. Building permits, we dropped down a little bit because those numbers have been trending lower. Other licenses and permits went up a little bit. Other things with similar investment income, we think it's going to be a better year with interest rates. For us, not for people paying them. And then additional funds. So Mark, I keep going back and forth, so this is like the most up-to-date number I had of 116 because of something that changed on the expense side. And I'll only bring it up now so that Mark doesn't think I'm losing my mind. So on the expense side, we had $8,000 that came in last year as surplus from the sale of the one of the old fire vehicles. That was originally going to be part of a trade-in for the new fire vehicle in the fall. But the trade-in value was only going to be $3,500. We were able to sell it for $8,000, so we wanted to put that money back towards the fire truck. But I messed up my dates. We didn't get the money until after July 1st, so we can't do anything with it until it certifies to free cash. So I took that number away, and I moved on. So that's why that number is a little bit lower. You'll see ambulance receipts with the fire chief's consent. It actually went up to $400,000 based on having enough money in that account, and it was a long discussion back and forth with finance over, I don't even know how many meetings, Mark.
Well, it passed the meeting that you weren't present at, so we're going to take credit for it. I would want to comment that you see the 310. It was $300,000 for 10 years. It took an act of immeasurable time and effort to get it to 310. This year, it's all the way up to 400,000. So I think credit is due where credit is due, that the fire chief saw the value in doing that and the big help that that made to the particular budget. That's the ambulance fund, notwithstanding the fire truck, which is a topic for another day, but the ambulance fund. He willingly agreed to it, and we willingly accepted. So that was a big help. Otherwise, the budget deficit would be 190,000 and not 140.
Any questions, guys, on the revenue? All set? Okay. All right, expenses. So I just did a little pie chart here. I don't know how big it is. So this is the best I could come up with the groupings of things. Education's about 51% this year, public safety 16, public works 9, health and human services 1, culture and rec 2%, debt service 4, employee benefits 9%, general government 7, and other 1%. So you see how the pie is split. Expense highlights, so we did some consolidations, right? So the municipal assistant position was broken into 2 departments, the town clerk and treasurer, so that department went away. Registrars was merged with elections, so that became 1. EMS was merged with fire, so that became 1. Plumbing and wire inspector merged into the building department. Public safety complex expenses merged into town buildings. And the sanitation engineer and animal inspector merged into the Board of Health. So what we were trying to do is things that were kind of like one-offs all out there. We put them all in the group of where they belonged. It gave a lot more clearer picture of what was there and also who oversaw it. Okay, let's see. Expense factors, so the regional school assessment increased by 4.19%. Dispatch assessment went from 0 last year, because we were on the 3rd year of the state 911 grant, or second year. We go up to about 75K this year, and retirement increased about 85K.
Heather, can I comment on the Wachusett Regional? It's, the budget includes that number, 4.19. There's an appetite on the, at least 4 of the 5 members, towns, because one of the members is going to have to pay 9.5%. But the other 4 members want theirs to be at 4%. So that little decrease from 4.19 to 4% could help by $32,000 to the budget deficit, but we don't know.
So here's the general government breakdown. I won't spend time to go over all of these pieces, but you see the FY23 actual budget, FY24 requests, the variations, and then the ultimate recommended. I think this is where FinCom and I ended up reconciling last week on the final numbers. So anything that we took out, we put back in, if that's what we did. I think that's where we're currently at for those final pieces. But do you guys have any questions on any of those? In the general government section.
No. I just want to comment, and as I had said when I met with you before, I really like seeing it in this format. I just think it's super helpful to have it all laid out, right, just in, like on a one-pager like that. It's nice.
Excellent. All right, good? Okay, public safety. So here's the public safety one as well. I remember fire department and EMS kind of absorbed into one department. Building department, you see the plumbing, wiring, all those pieces are up. Emergency management has already been part of the fire department for a while, and then the tree warden line is the very end. And what we did with the tree warden line, in case anyone's wondering what happened here, we have a person who's in the tree warden position who's not continuing in that position as an elected official, but we did look at the request and we reduced the amount they were looking for tree reduction, although we know and recognize it's a huge issue and something that's an ongoing concern. We did just spend $100,000 on tree removal, so feel like we took a chunk out of that piece, but it's definitely something we're going to have to come back and look at a later time. This just isn't the year that we have the funds to do so. Any questions on that? Okay. Education. So you see the numbers here, the Wachusett assessments, the vocational assessments are both there. You good on education? Okay. Public Works. DPW, snow and ice, so my caveat always on snow and ice, right, is absolutely we could totally increase that amount of money and they would likely spend every cent of it. And they're probably gonna spend more than $201,000, but when we have a really tight budget year, we're only able to have so much money to appropriate, and at the end of the day, for the good or for the bad, we can deficit spend snow and ice, and that's the only budget. So that's the one that if you look town after town, almost all of them keep it pretty close to the year before, if not just $1,000 more.
Question.
Yes, Neil?
Waste collection,
Yes.
isn't that paid monthly per household? Is it like an enterprise fund?
Yeah,
Money
so-
in covers the expense, or is there additional, I mean, is it $400,000?
So it's a wash. Remember, that was the part on the revenue side that I said washes with the expense side?
Okay.
So what they do is they take the total cost, if it's not an enterprise fund, they operate it, it's kind of like an enterprise fund, right? They figure out the total cost, divide it by the number of households, and then figure out what the monthly rate will be.
Right, 112, okay,
Neil, the revenue number is in local revenue
okay.
at that exact same number.
409,
So it's a
506.
smash, right?
Yep.
Okay,
And the reason you see the requested higher is because when I put in the request, I didn't know what the bids were gonna come in at.
okay,
So
thank
I
you.
was assuming there was gonna be an increase
Okay,
between all the numbers, okay? And then cemetery commission, we haven't done anything crazy with cemetery commission. What we did do is we moved the wages lines that was just appropriated for the, some of our DPW workers and our superintendent up to the DPW line, so it's all condensed. So if you wanted to know, you know, how much money do you pay Bob from the DPW, you don't have to hunt down 3 lines and hope you add it right. So, plus it gives the department itself it gives Tiffany a lot less work to do when she's paying, so she doesn't have to calculate precisely how many hours Bob worked over at the cemetery mowing and subtract that number out, because we're gonna mow regardless. Okay, all right, any questions on that? All right, Health and Human Services. So see the numbers there, those animal inspector sanitation, they rolled up to the Board of Health. So it's all part of one. COA number is there, and veterans agent. All good? Okay. All right, culture and recreation, you have the library, which they are keeping to just above minimum of what they need to be able to have accreditation, and recreation number, and historical commission. We're good on that? Since I sent this out to the board the other day, the only number in the library that changed was just the materials and the supplies line. Pam double-checked the calculation, realized the percentage had to be changed, so I did change those two numbers, but the bottom line stayed the same. And Mark, I'll send that all to you, my newest rendition. Okay, and the debt service. So what we did here is we did break out, it used to be excluded, non-excluded debt principal was one, and same thing was interest. But it's a lot easier when you're trying to go back to the tax levy on the first sheet of the revenue to be able to match those numbers up and not lose your mind when you separate those two pieces out. So that's what we did. So we can figure out what is actually excluded, meaning outside, right? And we had to go for debt exclusion or capital exclusion for it, or mostly debt exclusion for it at one point, or if it's part of the general budget. Any questions on that? This is really exciting stuff, isn't it? Okay, employee benefits. So this is mostly your health insurance, Medicare, those things, and then retirement assessment is in that. And the employee benefits themselves in the detailed lines, we actually separated out employees from retirees so that you can look at the two numbers and track them over time.
The employee benefits, it went down?
They did go down, so we had switched insurance companies last year, so with doing that, we, had a little bit of a advantage there. And then when we did the rates this year, we were in decent shape. We had people come on, come off. We do still have one extra, highest rate that we have just unaccounted for. We added in just as a safety net that we oftentimes will need, but usually it balances out pretty well. Okay. Any more questions on that? And this number, as Mark knows, we kept updating on a weekly basis because we had new folks in the police department, someone new in the fire department, so we were waiting for everyone to onboard to figure out, are you taking insurance? Are you not taking insurance? Which insurance are you taking? So the numbers kept changing.
But that reduction is reflected in the single page that I put up on the screen.
Correct.
To get us to 140.
Yep. All right, and then central purchasing. So we had originally gone down, you'll see this is, I think, one of the few recommended that actually went up. So in conversations with FinCom, they were concerned as we sent a couple reserve fund transfers already for diesel. They suggested that we up that line to try to hedge our bets a little bit more for next year. So we actually increased that by $5,000 based on the current trends in diesel. So that's where we're at that. So revenues versus expenses. So this is just, as of earlier, where we were currently looking. So 15,656,596 total expenditures. We also have 1,100 for the Greenway article that we do every year. And road stabilization. Remember the road stabilization, we already raised it on the taxes. This is just the expense side. It's another one of those washes, but we can't forget about that. Totaling 15,776,566. And then at the end of the day, you see we try to balance the revenues the same way. This one currently includes 116,408. So that will probably change in the next week or so if we get any information from the school or if we do any adjustments to any of our expenses. And takeaways, we already know this, watching school aid, state aid. Most large numbers for FY24 budget assessments are already in, so I don't think there's going to be major changes for those pieces. We're all set on insurance. We have those numbers. We've double-checked them. And then the idea is just to reduce operating stabilization as when more school assessments are reduced. That's all I have. Are there any questions? Is everyone awake?
No.
Good job.
That's quite the process to get to this point, though. So thank you so much for everybody who contributed and the hours and hours and hours that were spent trying to get us back to this place.
Is there anything on the budget, Julia, any of you on the board would like to talk about, or anything you guys want to change or look at or consider?
I have nothing. Do you guys have anything?
No, I sent my through
Okay.
earlier.
Okay.
Did you want to talk about, Carol, Nick had mentioned earlier about the Civic Plus?
It's okay, you can just make that adjustment tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay. So with that, I think it's prudent at this point to allow Capital to do their presentation.
I'm on it, hold on.
Yeah. So this is going to be 2 pages, but let me focus on the first and pardon my helping emphasize what this is, but these are presentations of capital need requests that the Capital Improvement Planning Committee, of which 4 members are present here this
5.
evening. 5 members are present this evening. I apologize. Are putting forward. Even though we rank them and we order them, just to be safe for this evening's discussion, I haven't prioritized them. I'm just listing the 5 that are coming forward. And the first one, and they've tried to be consistent in the presentation, the first one happens to be ditch ahead attachment. The sponsor is DPW. The approximate cost is $14,200. We are recommending, we know that the warrant article is the responsibility and has full authority of the Select Board. So this is a recommendation only, but our CIPC manual suggests that we speak to the point of funding. So we've basically led with our chin here, and we're going on record as saying that funding come out of capital depreciation, which currently has a balance of $70,000. Let me go through all 5 of them. The next one is a John Deere zero-turn mower. Same thing. Sponsor is DPW. The cost is $13,300 or $838. This has got a special consideration. To the CIPC's credit, when the presentation was made to us by the superintendent, we knew it wasn't to mow the common, but it was to mow the cemetery and the ball fields, and the question was raised, why wouldn't they want to participate in the funding of this? And the superintendent took that advice, went back, came back the next week and said, bingo, cemetery's in for a third, recreation's in for a third, and the cost for the DPW is not the full $13,000, but only the net cost of $46,000. I don't know if it's going to be exactly 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, because I think recreation gets credit for the trade-in, because it's their mower that we're trading in. But that's not going to be a deal breaker. It's just going to move the number maybe by $1,000 or so. That too, we're recommending that be funded out of the capital depreciation, which currently has a balance of $70,000. Our position is it should be $500,000. So kind of what's the difference if it's 70 or if it's 52? It's not $500,000 either way, and this is not a capital exclusion item. We did not recommend ARPA funds be used for it. A year ago, we put 2 items through capital depreciation. You might recall it was the lights, and I'm forgetting what the other one was. But there was $46,000 was taken out of capital depreciation a year ago. We're looking for $18,800 this year. The third bullet is the replacement of a kitchen hood in the Paxton Center School.
We were flattered by the superintendent actually making this particular presentation, but even more flattered that a call was made to us as we were leaving the meeting that the funding of this was going to be fully absorbed by Wachusett Regional School District at no cost to the town, the taxpayer, opera, or capital depreciation. What's not to like about that? We also have, which we wrestled with because it's got a huge price tag, but we have a 1989 dump truck way beyond its years, and the consideration was to replace it with a 2025 Freightliner. You might ask, why not replace a Mack truck with a Mack truck? We asked that same thing. Freightliner was the vehicle of choice. You might ask, why not new and used? We asked the same thing. The point of the matter is that they're not going to hold a used vehicle until the town decides what they're going to do 6 months, 3 months, 6 weeks from now, and lose a sale. So we deferred to it being a new truck. You also see up there that we have made no financing funding recommendation. I would submit to you that if it were to go to a single year debt exclusion, the average cost to the average family would be 156.78, which did not win the Capital Improvement Planning Committee over. So not for us to say, but we are supporting the vehicle, not necessarily at the moment the method of financing. And then there was a last-minute request put before us by the Recreation Commission having to do with water costs that they're incurring and trying to have some similarity between ball fields and soccer fields. And they basically, the sponsor of this is the Recreation Commission. They're looking to install a water well to the tune of $25,000. We didn't know if it was 21 or 22 or 24, so we just said not to exceed 25, which would fully capture the entire initiative. And that would be taken and funded completely out of recreation revolving funds. Again, of the 4 that are up there, one funded by the Wachusett Regional School District, one funded by the Recreation Revolving Fund, and 2 funded by depreciation, capital depreciation. Our goal was to get this equipment in place and have as little, if any, including no cost to the taxpayer, except for the Freightliner. On page 2 here, what we're asking you to do is to differentiate between the fact that we're putting the initiatives and the capital needs forward, so that any funding that is different than what we have recommended, we would want it to come back to the capital improvements planning committee for us to opine as to whether or not we agree on that. I would submit to you, in years past, we would submit the initiative, and any manner of funding would be cobbled together and put forward, and it would say Capital Improvement Planning Committee recommends approval when we didn't recommend approval. We want to have a say at the table, not only with the initiative, which we have put 5 of them forward, but when you decide how it's going to be funded by way of the warrant article, we want to have a chance to opine on it and not have it assumed that any funding is going to be acceptable to us. I think that's a mistake. I think that was a rub to the Capital Improvements Planning Committee a year ago. There were articles that we put forward that ended up being debt exclusions, which we were completely opposed to. But the warrant article read, Capital Improvement Planning Committee recommends approval. I would submit to you that we had a resignation as a result of that. And I think that there's a possible potential resignation in the works if something else doesn't, if that repeats itself. I guess I'll leave it at that. So we don't want to repeat of that. So we've actually included it in our committee report. It's a two-page report. If you scroll down to the bottom, it says 2 of 2. So we don't want somebody to just look at the first page and don't think that there was a second one. Part of our job is to entertain all the presentations and all the proposals and make the selections and put the capital needs forward. Our manual also suggests that we put the recommendation for funding forward. And we'd like to have a say with what that finally is. I think that's a fair request, and we're making it. So that's our committee report. Yep, Neil?
Question. Earlier this evening, I think, Carol, you mentioned that we can't put the ARPA money into the budget, which is, whether it can or can't. But, and this is one member, we haven't discussed it, but if we need to buy something with the funds and you have 20,000 or 25 or whatever you have available, Mark, is it something we could ask be funded, meaning the ditcher head attachment or the zero-turn mower, and then leave that money that we've put forward in this recommendation, was in our discussions, leave that back in the capital depreciation fund. That way you accomplish what you're actually buying something instead of putting it back in as a budget item. I don't know if that fits the profile of what you're looking for.
We've already discussed it earlier.
But that's what came to me when I was sitting back listening to the discussion earlier, saying that may be a way to do that.
I think it's kind of 6 of one, half dozen of another. You're either taking from stabilization or you're taking from capital depreciation.
Right. No, I'm
No,
talking take it from the ARPA funds that
We know what
you
you're saying.
want to.
Right,
We know what you're
but
Just wait.
We'll talk about it after.
Well, I think what Neil is saying, if we
We know
take
what
it
he's saying. You know what he's
from
saying.
capital
Yeah, we know
depreciation,
what he's
if we
saying.
don't take it from capital depreciation, we've got it left over for next year.
Right, we're
Yeah,
leaving
we know what
it.
you're saying.
That's, yes.
Right.
Okay. It's just a thought.
Our goal was not to put it on the backs of the taxpayer, and I think it's accomplished either way. Our preference was capital depreciation, and have opera go to the budget, and if that can't be done, then you'd have cobbled together another idea. So that's what this is all about.
Okay. Mark, were those projects listed in the order that you recommended them?
No.
Okay.
They
weren't.
decided not to prioritize them.
So
Is
you
that correct?
I can give you the order. They were pretty close. I don't have that particular file with me. I don't know if any members have it.
And the score sheet says?
We
Our
did-
overall scores are included in the minutes.
Yeah, we did the mode, the medium, the average. We cut it 6 different ways. And by the way, there were 2 that did not make the cut, which were very compelling presentations, and if money were available, you'd see 2 more on that list.
Okay,
One was
2,
a
3,
chipper,
4. There you go.
and the other was a F-350.
Okay.
There's your answer.
So,
In terms of priority, if you ask.
The ditcher, the mower,
Yeah.
Actually, the
So number 1 was the
Freightliner was higher.
Freightliner, right, the big truck,
the hood's dealt with.
No, that was 4.
the hood,
No,
and the ditcher head.
Oh,
Yeah.
I see where you go, okay.
yeah, and then you just read the mower.
And then the
I
mower.
think it's important to note that of the 4, those that you see up there, they weren't all unanimous to even put forward. The Freightliner was not unanimous.
Okay.
I think that could play into your consideration. I think the other ones were, but the Freightliner was not.
Okay. All right, so, you've heard the recommendations of, the Capital Improvement Planning Committee. I'd be interested in any discussion, on the select board end as far as what projects to consider as warrant articles.
I would say all 4. Well, we don't need the hood, but the other 3.
Right.
The other 3 being the ditcher head, the zero-turn mower,
Yeah.
and the Freightliner.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's important to footnote that we extended the courtesy to the Recreation Commission to come in after we had voted and after we had rang.
because we didn't want to get into the position of having a worthy project that wasn't on our capital report. So rather than reconvene the group and revote and the like, we put it forward, but we didn't revisit our voting and prioritize it.
If we put forward the Freightliner, though, we'll have to deal with how we're gonna finance that.
Would have to be, I think Mark alluded earlier, right? If it was a capital exclusion, it would be 100 and something to the average taxpayer.
We wouldn't put on capital exclusion that amount.
What's that?
We wouldn't put an amount like that on 1 year.
So then you
Good.
have to, as a
Exclusion.
debt exclusion
Good.
over a number of years.
Yeah, it could be that
The last-
we have a debt exclusion.
Yeah, there's no way
Again,
we
not
would-
for us to
I wouldn't
opine,
anyway.
but for the
Nothing over
select board.
100,000 we would put.
That's typical,
Yeah.
yeah, typically.
But the
Right.
cost would be higher than what's there because you have to add in the
But-
financing and interest.
Yeah, but
Right.
we can't put an average of about 150, you said? Average home about 150.
156.78.
I got 140, but
That would send people through the,
yeah. So I think, and what is the life term for a debt note on that?
I didn't break it out to the number of, we'd have to figure out how many years you'd want it to go.
No, but what is the life of the?
Right, so
Oh,
like,
the
you know,
life
you
exten-
can only finance a vehicle for
The
how
current
many
one we
years?
have is from what, 1989?
89.
So
So
could
the
the
life is
5
40 years, we
yes.
hope.
So, because I know you mentioned 4 years, but I think we can have 5 or.
that machine does a lot of work.
Yeah, it
December.
does.
Okay,
It does.
and that would
The
be.
good news is we have some debt coming off the books. The bad news is rates could be worse at this particular time.
Right.
Well, but that, if I am correct, you said for 2025, not 2024.
That's delivery.
Delivery.
Expected delivery, it's
Right.
that far out.
Yeah,
Right.
well, remember, we still have a truck on order right now that hasn't been
Right,
received
it'll
yet.
come sometime this summer.
Yeah,
Right.
So we don't have to do the borrowing until we have to pay for it.
Right.
until it's here, right? Yeah.
But you'd still, if it was a debt exclusion, we'd still have to have an election.
Oh, yeah, I'm
Correct.
not saying
So
that, I'm
within
talking
90
about,
So,
yeah.
Yep.
So it'll have to be a special election. So,
Yeah. So we'd have to talk about lease versus debt exclusion on that. That's really the only question, right? There isn't cash available,
Right.
obviously.
well, if you do a lease, then it'd be in the budget, which there's no room in the
Right,
budget.
right.
So it's gotta be
It's
a
gotta
debt
be a debt
exclusion.
exclusion.
Yeah.
It's the only way. And then it really just comes down to,
Yes.
town meeting and then, an
Terms.
election,
Yeah.
Before September.
assuming it even passes at town meeting. But then it would need to go to an election risk before September, so.
So the only thing we can really vote on would be the ditch your head and the zero-turn mower.
No, we've got to,
Well, we have to vote to put them
Put them
on
on the
on the
warrant.
warrant.
I'm okay with, yeah. I make a motion to put the ditch your head, the zero-turn mower, and the Freightliner on the warrant with the Freightliner needing a debt exclusion.
I'll second that.
Okay.
How about the,
I'm
where's
sure
the
you're
well?
gonna-
You gotta do the well, too.
the well doesn't, oh.
Like, don't have to go on the warrant.
The well
it
doesn't
doesn't
need to go on the
Alright,
warrant,
okay.
yeah.
It's just a vote to move it from one pocket to the other.
So I think you're gonna be wrestling with the same thing that we did. It's a three-legged stool. Number one, the need is compelling. There's no denying that there's a need for this. Number two is there's no cash. So, and number three, we didn't have an appetite to put it on the backs of the townspeople in the way of any kind of tax rate increase. So that gets you back to zero, that, what do you do? And that's the frustrating thing, because there were other projects that are not on that list, and we also know there are other projects. I mean, this is one department. DPW came to us. We got police and fire coming, I'm sure, next year. So the problem, as dire and as it is right now, I would say is gonna be worse next year. But, and you can see right down there, capital improvement recommends, we would like to have our committee meet to vote and not have it assume that it says recommends approval.
Yeah.
Because we may not.
Right, and that's entirely
Right.
your prerogative. If you don't
Right.
agree with the warrant article as it's written.
Correct.
Okay. And you have it currently listed.
As a
Heather,
capital
as a-
exclusion,
as a-
yeah, because that's what we had talked
Yeah,
about at capital, but I
right.
can change that. That's not a problem.
Okay. So that said, are we ready to go through warrant articles?
Or
think
did you
that's
want to
where
circle
we're at.
back to ARPA?
Yeah, we're gonna
Oh, let's
circle
go back to ARPA. Okay, so if we go back there, Heather, you are chair of the ARPA committee in Hubbardston, correct?
Yes.
What is your understanding of whether ARPA funds can be used to offset the budget?
So you'd have to, I think you'd have to tie it into something here, right? So you'd have to either make it a project, or one option is, like we have the MS4 stormwater compliance engineering, and now we have the MS4 section on the DPW budget. So theoretically, if the select board wanted to connect those two, what you could always do is reduce the town's budget by a certain amount and move that money to the MS4 project, with the caveat that, right, that expense isn't gonna go away. You're not absorbing it permanently. Next year, when you do the budget, you're gonna have to put it back into
Right.
the budget as the baseline before you add increases. But you could shift the burden sharing over to ARPA for that purpose, and that way it cleans that piece up and keeps it all
And that's what we said at the beginning of the
nice and
meeting.
tidy.
Yeah.
Right.
And we're not creating something that we can't sustain in the future because it's already there. So because we can't do that with ARPA funding.
Right.
So I think this is the way to manage both ends of it. We've got the stormwater in there already.
Yep.
We can just increase the project up there and take that out of the budget. So you've got depending how much you want to use.
To move over, right.
I'd like to use 30 personally, but
So another consideration is you got a police cruiser sitting in the police budget
that's the least.
to help subsidize the lease.
But
It's a capital lease.
But it's not new.
I don't think you can pay a lease with ARPA
It's
funds.
just paying. But
I don't know
the
the
way
answer
we've
to
just
that question.
discussed it, it's
Yeah,
I think the MS4 piece is just
it's already
cleaner,
there.
yeah.
because it's just adding to it, and then you're just reducing it, and we'll notate like crazy on the budget, so we know next year, if we all lose our minds, that we
Yeah.
have to add that money.
So now it's just the amount. Do you want to
Right.
go with 20, 25, 30? I know Kurt thought we didn't want to hold this too tight, but I don't know.
Well, 30 would still leave us 10. And then we still have, projects that are being completed.
Right.
So I'm fine with 30. If you guys are fine with 30, but you tell me. I mean, that's,
I prefer 30, because then we're taking 30 off the budget, we're reducing what we're having to go to stabilisation for.
Well, and the
Yep.
MS4 is 35, so that pretty much takes care of that.
just about,
So
yeah.
that helps.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
All right, so does somebody want to make a motion that we take, we may need to make a couple of motions, right? Because we have to first move money.
We have to take.
Increase the
we
ARPA
have-
money funding for the MS4 by 30,000,
Yep.
and in doing so, decrease the,
But we have to take encumbered money and unencumber it first. So we have encumbered money in assistance to households and in the signs. So we have to take money from the signs, 10,000 from the signs, unencumber it, and then
20,000
take
from-
20,000 from assistance to
Assistance.
households and unencumber it. And then we'll re-encumber it to,
MS4.
MS4.
that's a motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right.
We should ask for 50.
No, it's 50 there. Yes, for 20.
That's pretty obvious, everybody's trying.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so that'll bring the budget down by 30,000, by funding the stormwater.
So now we're at 110
So,
and change.
yep, so we're at 110, that'll need to be funded, at least for now, out of stabilization. Is what I'm hearing. I don't think there's anywhere else we can cut. I can't, that's, I trust your judgment on that.
We just have to cross our fingers and
Yeah.
hope that WRSD comes
We
back.
tried cutting the select board salaries and it survived. So,
How much can you take?
You might as well take it, really.
After tonight.
It's not gonna help.
I know.
It's not gonna help at all.
Good gracious, I
and
would,
we actually went the
happily
other way,
hand it
as
over.
Heather mentioned. We added to the diesel fuel, so
yeah,
we were back and forth.
yeah,
But the position on the stabilization is that the number that's on that, our sheet would go down dollar for dollar for every dollar that the Wachusett Regional Assessment goes down. So that's the wash we want to have.
yeah.
If it doesn't move, then we're at now 110. But if we get 70,000 in, then we're at 40.
Yeah, and that's less that we have to then take out of stabilization.
Right.
Which, you know, is huge, but right now, that's gonna have to be our stopgap. Barring any other change that,
But I would, don't want to oversell the point and make the point, but 6 weeks ago, having an override of $250,000 was on the table at the Finance Committee. So I think there's a lot of good feeling to go around that that's off the table.
yes, and I don't want it to get lost that, you know, the amount of work that was put into this was huge.
Absolutely.
To start with a $400,000+ deficit and get it to where it is now, kudos to everybody involved, like, that's huge.
And everybody felt the pinch, you know?
Yeah.
Every department felt the pinch
Right.
somewhere.
You know, I think the town and all of its committees really did a wonderful job trying to get this to where it needs to be. So I appreciate that and I thank you. So now that we have the ARPA discussion out of the way, do you want to move on to the articles?
Please.
Okay. So currently, we're gonna refresh ourselves here briefly on how this works, okay? So we have both Select Board and Capital here currently.
Do you need us?
Finance is,
Do you need our
do you want to
CIPC
make
committee?
your
You might as well make your
recommendations now?
recommendations on the first ones.
It's entirely up to you. You can meet at another time to make your own recommendations, but since you're here, I didn't want to exclude you from that if you wanted to do it now.
Let's do it now.
I'm inclined to meet privately as
I am too.
CIPC, if you don't mind.
That's fine with me. So do you want to close your meeting? Are you done, or do you want to stay?
I might stay, but not in an official capacity.
There you go.
So, is there a motion to close our meeting?
Motion to close the meeting.
Second. Discussion. Favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Abstention? None. We're closed.
I said aye.
Oh, good girl.
I voted.
Okay.
All right.
So Mark said they will meet privately to discuss their recommendations. All right, so we'll just go forward. So Article 1 is currently the capital to replace the DPW 1989 Mack truck. I will read it, and then we're going to move to approve placing the article on the warrant, and then we're going to move placing it as Article 1 on the warrant. Okay? So Article 1, capital replacement DPW 1989 Mack truck, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, transfer from available funds, borrow, or otherwise provide the sum of $280,000 for the replacement of the DPW's 1989 Mack dump truck, provided however that this appropriation shall be contingent upon passage of a Proposition 2.5, and I'm going to just substitute debt exclusion referendum to assess additional real estate and personal property taxes for a single year under Chapter 59, Section 21C I.5, which may actually need to change as well.
It's not a single year.
Of the general laws or act in any way thereon. So I need a motion to approve the article to be placed on the warrant with any changes that we suggest.
So moved.
So the changes that I would suggest is that it not be a capital exclusion, that it be a debt exclusion so that it can be done over time.
Yeah.
And then the necessary changes made to the article language to support that.
And just keep in mind too that the number's likely to go up, right?
And
Once we
of
add
course.
financing and interest.
Yep.
But we always we don't take that into consideration. We vote on the amount of the,
Okay. Okay.
And then make a motion to make that Article 1.
Oh, you have to vote on the first one. So, is there a second?
second, sorry.
With the
second.
friendly amendment?
Sorry,
Yep.
second.
And all in favor to place this on the warrant?
Aye.
Aye.
And is there a motion to place this as Article 1 on the warrant?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Do you want to make a recommendation now, or do you want to wait on that?
I recommend approval.
I recommend approval.
Okay.
I don't think we'd put it on there if we didn't.
So there's a motion, and is there a second to recommend approval? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. This is great that we're doing all three at once. I'm not used to that.
Confusing.
Okay, so Article 2 is for the ditcher head attachment, to see if the town will vote to transfer the sum of $14,150 from the capital depreciation fund to purchase a ditcher head attachment for the Department of Public Works or act in any way thereon. Is there a motion to place this article on the warrant?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And is there a motion to place this article as Article 2 on the warrant?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And is there a motion for recommendation?
Approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Article 3 is another capital item to replace the 2014 Exmark mower, to see if the town will vote to transfer the sum of $4,666 from the capital depreciation fund to purchase a replacement mower for the Department of Public Works or act in any way thereon. Is there a motion to place this article on the warrant?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Is there a motion to place this as Article 3 on the warrant?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Aye.
And is there a motion for a recommendation?
Approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
So just a note on that, so as
Yeah.
Mark stated earlier, if rec ends up taking less that they pay on their end because of the trade-in, this number might go up, so we need to clarify with rec.
Okay.
I wasn't aware, wasn't thinking of that when I put the
So you might
number.
want to take that number out until,
Yeah, we can
let's not
add.
vote on that number.
Okay.
A
So,
sum of number. a sum of-
Alternatively, we can speak to the Recreation Department and ask them to step back from that.
Yeah, we can do that. I mean, I think it's fine to leave the number in, because it's possible that
Yes.
some stuff on this could change by the time you guys sign it in a couple weeks, right?
yeah.
Has this been to town council yet?
No, just a couple elements of it.
Can you tell us when you get to us, if they've been to town council?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so moving on, Article 4 is for the water enterprise. Nothing new here, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate through water department receipts, water fees, or water charges, or transfer from available funds a sum of money to operate the water enterprise as follows: compensation $240,433, expenses $720,225, debt $96,198, for a total of $1,046,856.
56.
It should be 56, Julia, sorry.
What did I say? Did I
You
say-
said the right number on
Oh.
your sheet of paper.
Oh, okay.
Carol had caught that the number didn't add up, and I had written it
But-
exactly as it was submitted to me, so I went back and did the math.
Oh, okay. So use Heather's number.
Yes, please.
And that will all be raised from water department receipts. Is there a motion to place this article on the warrant?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Is there a motion to place this as Article 4 on the warrant?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Is there a motion for a recommendation?
Approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Article 5 is for water take maintenance, to see if the town, this is again another recurring article, to see if the town will vote to appropriate from retained earnings of the Water Enterprise Fund the sum of $107,189 or any other sum to pay for the inspection, maintenance, repair, or modification of the Asnabumskit Road water storage tank in accordance with the third year of the
Okay.
existing contract with Suez Advanced Solutions, or act in any way thereon.
It's the
So
fifth
moved.
year.
It is the 5th year.
I will adjust.
And is that
This is
amount?
a-
Yeah.
This is a 10, this
It's
is a 10,
20.
is a 20 years, okay.
So is that figure correct, 107,189 for the 5th year? You check that, Donna, thanks.
Excellent.
Because it will go down later on after the capital's been paid off.
Should be the 5th. I
Okay.
copied and pasted.
All right, so is there a motion to place this article on the warrant?
So moved.
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Is there a motion to place this as Article 5 on the warrant?
So moved.
second,
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And is there a, apparently we have already recommended approval.
I was anticipating.
Is there a motion for a recommendation?
Approval.
second,
All in favor? Aye.
aye.
Okay. Article 6, and this is putting funds into our road improvement. So to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $118,870 to the Road Improvement Capital Stabilization Fund or act in any way thereon. Is there a motion to place this article on the warrant?
So moved.
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Is there a motion to place this as Article 6 on the warrant?
Approval.
Second.
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Julia,
Yeah.
when does this go to print? Because it says, Finance Committee will make recommendation at town meeting. If we have time. we'd
I was
like-
anticipating, Mark, so I think when I talked to Donna, she said usually this comes back before the select board in about 2 weeks, so about 2 weeks before town meeting. So they'll approve finally at that point, so we have a little time. So if
But the-
FinCom meets, you guys can recommend in the meantime.
Well, that's what I'm thinking that we might try to do so that the printed warrant article has
The
our
recommendation.
approval.
And not a
Or
blank
disapproval.
line.
I think they might want to conduct their business before the town meeting.
Awesome.
I think. They're kind of meeting out right now.
I imagine. All right. So, where did we leave off? Did I?
Recommending approval.
Okay, is there a motion for a recommendation on Article 6?
Approval.
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. Article 7 is to use the funds from the road improvement to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $118,870 from the Road Improvement Capital Stabilization Fund for the purpose of resurfacing roads or act in any way thereon. Is there a motion to place this article on the warrant?
So moved.
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Aye. Is there a motion to place this article as Article 7 on the warrant?
Approval.
Yes.
So moved.
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And is there a motion for a recommendation on Article 7?
Approval.
second,
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, Article 8, Chapter 90 authorization to see if the town will vote to accept any funds to be allocated by the Commonwealth under authorization of Chapter 90 of the Massachusetts General Laws pertaining to highway funds, to authorize the Board of Selectmen to enter into contracts for the construction, reconstruction, and improvement of town roads, and to authorize the town treasurer to borrow in anticipation of receipt of said funds to be expended under the direction of the Director of Public Works or act in any way thereon. Is there a motion to place this article on the budget? On the warrant.
So moved.
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Is there a motion to place this article as Article 8 on the warrant?
So moved.
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
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 And is there a motion for a recommendation?
Approval.
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Aye. Article 9 is for our revolving accounts.
So if I can give you just a little background on this one, Julia. So Donna and I, this one's gonna be for, I guess I'll wait. This one's the expenditure one, the bylaw one comes a little bit later. We probably wanna swap order, but I'll come back to that.
Okay.
The bylaw, right, we wanted to amend it this year for the electrical inspector and plumbing and gas inspector. So we're adding 2 new funds. So most people probably want to amend the bylaw before they vote to set the rate on
Right.
what the amount to raise.
I don't understand that. So for FY '24, we're going to have a revolving fund for the electrical and plumbing inspector.
That's been the goal. We've been talking about that since I think I
But
started.
we've
around
got the
June.
revenue
So how it
in
would.
the budget, and
Yeah.
we've got the
Yep, so
budget
we're,
expense in the budget.
yep, so we're expecting to still get the revenue side. So what would happen, other towns have done this, how they do it is they figure out what the set rate for an inspector is to go out to an inspection, right? And then they look at the rate that they charge for the inspection. So if it's $50 for Bob to go out to do an inspection, and the town used to make $25, the town still wants to make $25, so the cost per inspection is $75. So the person would pay $75, $50 goes into the revolving fund and comes out and pays Bob, $25 goes into the revenue. So the town makes no less revenue than they did before. Bob still gets paid, but for next year, for FY '25, we no longer have to budget in the general fund the expense for Bob. The benefit of that is Bob fluctuates, right? Sometimes Bob does 400 inspections a year, sometimes Bob does 20 inspections a year. This past year, we ran into an issue with our assistant building inspector, the way we had things structured. We actually had to tell him he couldn't do any more inspections after June, and the building commissioner had to do them. And we get really tight on some of the other inspectors because we don't always budget enough money because we don't always anticipate the right amount of growth. So this allows the building department to fluctuate as it needs to with plumbing and gas and electrical, right? If there's a boom and they're busy as all, no problem. It takes care of it. If it's slow, no problem. And it takes the Otis off of the budget for FY '25. So by FY '25, you'd be saving about $14,000 on the expense side, still making just as much on the revenue.
So will we be collecting FY '24
So
and putting it in here rather than having it on our local revenues?
no, so it's still going to go on local revenues, Carol. The split would
25.
just be, yeah, it would just be the so
Additional.
again, you pay $75 in for your plumbing inspection, right? Bob comes, does his
Yeah, I get
inspection,
it.
he gets a check, or you pay ahead of time, whatever. His check gets cashed so that $50 of it goes into the revolving fund, $25 goes directly to the revenue.
So what I'm saying is, we've estimated our full revenue for these two inspectors,
Yeah?
but we're not going to materialise those two local revenues because part of it is going to go in here.
No, you're gonna materialize the full thing, because whatever we would, say right now, the inspection costs, say right now we're making a profit of $50 after we pay the inspector, we're still gonna make the $50 profit. We're gonna adjust our inspection cost so that it accounts for that piece. So we're not anticipating our revenues to go down if everything stays based on our current projections. Our revenues aren't gonna go down, we're just gonna be able to pay Bob out of the revolving fund. So let's say that
But for
let's say
FY
the
'24, we've budgeted that.
The
I know what you're
expense,
saying
yeah.
for FY '25, I get that.
So for FY '24, the good news is, let's assume that this bylaw passes, right? Because you're taking a gamble. We don't know if the bylaw is gonna pass or not. Say the bylaw passes, it goes into effect, let's say August or September, by the time the AG's office gets back, finishes the posting notice, and they say, September, here you go, you're good to go. At that point, we stop spending from the expense side, and we just have the fees for the inspector, the costs we're paying them, go into the revolving fund, and our revenues are still collected the same way we always collect the revenues. So there's no change, but at that point, we realize the savings because we're no longer expending money out of the expense. We can't reduce those costs now with the hope of the bylaw passing because we don't know if the bylaw is
I
going to
get
pass.
that.
But the revenue shouldn't change at all.
Well, you can't reduce the cost right now anyways, because you still have to have the budget in place to be able to pay them while you're putting the money
Yeah,
into
exactly.
the account.
And you don't want to reduce it and say, okay, well, let's say the, AG's office approves it by December. You're still gambling on the fact that the town meeting needs to pass the bylaw. If town meeting says, no, this is crazy, I don't think so, you're nuts, which is always possible, they could say that, then, we already have it budgeted, we're fine to go. But if they say, yeah, great idea, then by the time it gets up and running, we'll at least realize the savings on the expense side, and then we'll have a full realization of the savings the following year on the expense.
Yep.
Okay.
So, that said,
Still don't know we're doing it, but
where is the bylaw?
it's at the back.
So it's a little bit, the article's a little bit further down, it's number 11.
And has this been to town council?
This one has not been to town council yet.
I have it as 12. It looks like it's 12
You have it
right
as
now.
12, because
Yeah.
I had tree warden in there before.
Oh, okay.
So if
So is tree warden,
Yeah, so the tree warden one I did send to town council, and tree council was like, hey, Elected to appointed, great, you have to do a town meeting and an election vote, or you can do a special act.
Okay,
So, given those options, either way, we're not prepared this year to do both of them.
So
But
11's
next
coming
year, we theoretically, if we're doing a charter review and any changes to our charter, that would be a good time where we're already doing a special act to incorporate in moving the tree warden from elected to appointed.
okay.
So that has gone bye-bye.
So the next one is Article 12. No,
Yep.
Article 10. So,
So next one's what, Chusa Greenway.
which is now
If you want to
number
skip
9.
the bylaw one.
which is now 9.
Right, because if we want to put the bylaw ahead of the revolving
Yeah.
accounts, we need to renumber at this point.
We can
So,
do that.
so do you want to do greenways first?
Sure.
So we'll make, greenways will be Article 9.
Unless we put the bylaw there for number 9.
Right, yeah, I mean, you can do it either way, however you want to do
It'd
it.
be easier.
6 more after the other.
Yeah, so we put the, number 9 would be the revolving funds bylaw.
Okay. So,
The
You want,
numbers.
I'm sorry, you want to move the bylaw, you want to move
Yeah,
Greenways?
the bylaw, they might have to change 10, 11, 12.
so this one's going to be 9 instead.
So what, I'm sorry, what am I making
So
nine?
9 is the bylaw.
Okay,
the-
you want to
the
make
new
9 the
bylaw. The bylaw for the revolving funds, for number 9.
I'm just trying to keep myself straight here.
All right, so the bylaw.
Mm-hmm.
So the language is at the very back. I don't know, Julie, if you want to read the article first, and then I can flip to the back.
This is just for Mass General Law.
Excuse me?
Is this just for Mass General Law?
No, this is our bylaw. This is
Yeah,
our
I just
bylaw
recognise
language
it for
that
Mass
we
General
have.
Law.
Okay, so we're looking at now the revolving fund bylaw to see if the town will vote to replace the current departmental revolving funds bylaw in its entirety with the new bylaw as attached, or take any related action thereto. And Heather's gonna get us to the bylaw.
So Dawn and I had a long conversation about whether or not we should just amend the bylaw or put the whole thing in its entirety. So here, the kicker with the departmental revolving funds bylaw is we don't have it on the website anywhere. We didn't really have a copy of it when it came back from the AG's office. So our concern was that a lot of people probably don't know it really exists unless they were at the meeting in 2017 when it was voted. So to avoid having to educate everyone and go through all those pieces and just put part of it here, it made sense to just replace its entirety. So you're essentially going through reinforcing everything that's already there and then just adding the sections down below. So down here, you just have the electrical inspections and the plumbing and gas inspections pieces. And they both say the same thing, just pursuant, just
Yeah.
different based on if it's electrical or plumbing. So it would give the building commissioner, because they're moving into the building commissioner, building department, the ability to expend from it, which makes sense, because you don't want someone necessarily paying themselves. Electrical inspector charges and fees, what you collect, to be used on payment of all charges and fees related to electrical expenses and electrical inspector fees, and none other than as set forth in the normal chapter and verse, annual reports, and then fiscal year '24 and subsequent years.
Okay.
So, and again, this hasn't been to legal, it will go to legal, but it's good because it's only 2 lines.
So the plumbing and gas inspectors, they're appointed by the Board of Health?
Yes.
So I think the Board of Health, you guys were okay with, because there was
Buildings-
nothing that was specific in our bylaws or charter that ties them to the Board of Health. I think you guys were good with moving them to the building department.
Yeah, the Board of Health voted that they were fine with that, yep.
So,
Okay. So, is there a motion to place the bylaw, the new revolving fund bylaw article on the warrant?
So moved.
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Is there a motion to place the revolving fund bylaw article on the warrant as Article 9?
So moved.
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Is there a motion for a recommendation?
Approval.
second,
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right, so the next one, then, we can do the revolving funds. So this is now going to be Article 10. I'm sorry. Yes, Article 10. Just put that there. Okay. So for the revolving accounts, to see if the town will vote to set the annual expenditure limits for fiscal year 2024 for all revolving funds established under the general bylaws as set forth below, or act in any way thereon. COA is 25,000, recreation 250,000, library and Paxton Days are pending, electrical inspector 50,000, plumbing and gas inspector 50,000. Is there a motion to place this article on the warrant?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Is there a motion to place this as Article 10 on the warrant?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Is there a motion for a recommendation?
Approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Next is Wachusett Greenways, which is currently sitting as Article 10, but is now going to be Article 11. Okay. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds the sum of $1,100 or any other sum to be used for the expenses for Wachusett Greenways, an 8-town collaborative, said funds to be administered and expended by Wachusett Greenways or act in any way thereon. Is there a motion to place the Wachusett Greenways article on the warrant?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Is there a motion to place the Wachusett Greenways article as Article 11 on the warrant?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Is there a motion for a recommendation?
Approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It's riveting right now, I'll tell you. All right. So now we move past the tree warden is not going to be on there. We already addressed the revolving fund bylaw. We were at 11, so now we're at 12. And this is the next bylaw, which is the alcohol provision. This is going to be a 12. All right. To see if the town will vote to replace the current alcohol bylaw in its entirety with the new bylaw as attached or take any related action thereto. Heather's going to take us to the bylaw.
This has not been to legal yet, but this is essentially all of it parsed down. I'm not sure if they're gonna recommend to leave it parsed down or to simply remove it, because remember, when it was originally created, it was more specific and limiting than Mass General laws. And now Mass General laws, like, you can't be publicly drunk, you can't be drinking.
Right.
With open containers, you can't be in a car drinking. The only difference on ours was we had a provision that said you can't be on your neighbor's property drinking unless you have permission from your neighbor. So, I mean, we could leave something like that. I don't know if we want to.
Are we going to not reference the bylaw that we're removing?
So we can, but the problem I run into, right, we don't have codified bylaws. So we can reference it, but then you have to reference specifically when it was, like the FinCom one, right? They reference specifically when it was adopted, when it was approved by the AG's office. The problem is, I don't always know when the bylaw was approved by the AG's office. We don't always have a clear record of that piece of information. Sometimes it's in the bylaws and sometimes it's not. So that's the problem, right? We can do whatever. I just would argue that we'd want to be consistent because someone might be concerned that something is not the same level, right, if it doesn't have it. But I can put whatever information everyone wants in it. In other towns, I haven't, but I can add that if that's something that we're used to doing and we'd like to do.
Yeah, we're used to doing that, and the thing is, at least we know that what the bylaw we're amending, what we're trying to change, right? So, because we got that reference, so just put the...
Do we want to put the old bylaw in the warrant with it?
Could do, in the, as part of
And
the
then that
attachment.
takes away the codification
Yeah.
issue, right?
Well, I can put the old bylaw in there and strike the whole bylaw out.
Yeah, but I'm saying
And
we
leave
still
that.
Take
reference
that
it,
fine,
yeah.
but it's only a
So
couple of
that's when we
lines.
don't go back to that,
Yep.
come across that, say, oh, we can't do this, because this bylaw's in place.
I will take care of that.
Okay. So is there a motion to place the replacement alcohol bylaw on the warrant?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Is there a motion to place the replacement alcohol bylaw as Article 12 on the warrant?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And is there a motion for a recommendation?
Approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Article 14 is another bylaw. This is the winter parking ban that was requested by the DPW director to see if the town will vote to accept the proposed winter parking ban bylaw as attached or take any related action thereto. And here's the bylaw. Parking is prohibited on all public ways annually from November 15th through April 15th. In addition, any vehicle other than one acting in an emergency, parked day or night on any street in the town so as to interfere with the work of removing or plowing snow, removing ice, or sanding the street may be removed and towed away under the authority, discretion, and direction of the chief of police or the chief's designee. The registered owner of a motor vehicle which is removed pursuant to this bylaw shall be fully responsible for all charges and expenses incurred for the removal and storage of said motor vehicle.
So again, that has not been through legal, but we did steal that from another town.
I thought we already got this.
Yeah, we don't. Right.
I have a question on that. Are you gonna issue ticket things? Usually, when a winter parking ban goes into effect, the officers go out and first they survey it, and then they will give them a ticket. It's sort of a warning. And then if the people don't comply, then they'll tow the vehicle. And then at the day of a storm, usually they'll send out an officer, they ticket the car for the violation, and then they tow the car away. So I think it's imperative that you have that ticket, because that gives it the force of law.
That's entirely the police department's purview as to how they want to administer
Because
it.
remember,
Yep.
you gotta pay for the printing of the ticket.
So
Hello?
the thing I would say is, right, we don't currently, to my knowledge, unless Carol, you know of one in there that I didn't see, but I don't think we have a non-criminal disposition bylaw. If you don't have a non-criminal disposition bylaw, you can't just do the civil tickets for, these types of bylaws and so forth. You cite to it, right, that you can issue a fine and the fine is X dollars, but you have to tie back to the civil non-disposition bylaw. We don't currently have one.
Oh, okay.
So in the
But we need
future,
one.
if we add that, then you can go back and tie all those things up and say who has the discretion to issue them and so forth. But as of right now, that's why it just simply says, we tow, you pay.
Well, what we
You
got-
don't pay us, you pay the tow company to get your car back.
Well, we do have a ticketing system in place.
Yeah, we did put the ticket.
Yeah, a couple of years ago. I don't know if it went to bylaw, I don't
We
think.
talked about there
Yeah.
had to be an appeal process, and we had to put an appeal process in place for that in order to do that. But
But we didn't do it through a civil disposition bylaw, right?
I don't believe so. But that was reviewed by legal, was not?
I believe so. We got that from another town.
Yeah. So,
But anyway, so this one simply is just, you park there, car go bye-bye.
yeah, right. Yeah, and however the police department wants to handle that is their purview.
I think usually right now their method is, if there's a snowstorm coming like in the evening, they'll start out in the afternoon going and reminding people to remove their vehicles.
Yep.
So I don't think it's a first resort, I think they just want something that's a little stronger than a suggestion.
The other thing, too, your start date is November 15th. Occasionally, it snows before that. So you can advertise publicly that the parking ban is now being put in effect. So you can get those, warn the people that you get your car off the street, well, it's gonna be towed. If you just stick to that hard 15, if they're there on the 14th, it's very difficult to go tow someone's car.
So you actually, Bill brings up a good point. How do they word that if you want to, activate it sooner than that?
Yeah, so I actually had a lot of discussion about this with Travis, right? So a couple things you have to keep in mind. Number one, you don't want things to be too discretionary because then someone's going to be confused about the expectation. So there was one town who said, from the first snow or ice event. The problem is everyone's going to define the first snow and ice event differently, right? Like you may not see the snowflakes, it might be flurrying, DPW is out, or maybe they're not out, does that qualify, does that not? The other thing is that most towns have November 15th through April 15th. And the third thing is this a lot easier for consistency because it's also the no dig date for DPW, right? They can't open up the ground between November 15th and April 15th. So it keeps everything consistent. Now, if something comes up before then, you can just ask the people, please don't park on the road. Travis also said our trend has been that more storms are happening in the second part of the year after January
Yeah.
than what we used to get in, the occasional September or Halloween snow. So he was pretty comfortable with those dates, understanding that, things can happen. But what I worry about is for a resident, I would want a clear expectation of when to do it. And if I'm just trained over time, November 15th, I can't park on the side of the road, through April 15th, then my mind is set. I can take the chance if it's not snowing, but if it is, I know my car could go bye-bye
Yeah, yeah.
if I take the risk.
I mean, that sounds reasonable to me, and honestly, I would defer to Travis as the expert on that, and if he's comfortable with it, then I'm comfortable with it. Okay. So, is there a motion to place the winter parking ban bylaw on the warrant?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Is there a motion to place the winter parking ban bylaw on the warrant as Article 13?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Is there a motion for a recommendation?
Approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. Article 15 is the replacement finance committee bylaw. We got the red line version back from town council. Obviously, we haven't, as a board, discussed that since it's come back. Has finance had the opportunity to discuss it since it's come back?
They reviewed it a little bit last week, and I have talked with Mark. He was good with all of it. He had one section just to mention.
Okay.
But otherwise, they were good, and at their FinCom meeting last week, they actually voted to recommend to reduce the quorum, or the number of people on the board from 9 to 7.
Yeah.
Because they've been having such a hard time getting a quorum.
Right.
So
Okay.
that piece we did change in there. This is, I sent out to all three of you, as well as Mark, all of the red line versions. I think the only section here that he had a question about, I just have to pull up the original document, I'm sorry, it's not showing me as redlined as I would like in my, my notation there. There was just one section where town council had said, this is already in there, in another section, you don't need this. Mark did comment that he would prefer to leave it, even though it's already addressed. Let's see. Leave this week, where are you? Come on, FinCom. Nope, that ain't it. Sorry. Here we go. Nope, that's not the right one. Try again. In case you were wondering, the revolving fund bylaw was originally reviewed by legal when they did it. Because we didn't have our hard copy, we got our electronic copy, we got a copy from Brian. All right, here we go. Okay, so section 2.3, although there may exist certain policies elsewhere that may address directly or indirectly matters involving the annual budget, including some policy procedures as to the annual budget's development, Finance Committee bylaws shall take authoritative precedence over such policies as relates to the preparation of the annual budget. And Brian wrote, "This is true whether stated here or not."
Right. Just
So,
simply,
Mark's
bylaw
preference was-
trumps the policy no matter what.
Yep, Mark's preference was to leave that, but again, it's ultimately what the board chooses to do.
Okay. Have you guys had the opportunity to review the red line version?
I couldn't see I couldn't see the red lines. I've read it, but I could never find the red line, even when I went into Office 365.
Really?
Yeah.
I had no trouble. Are you, well, we
I'm
can
okay with it.
certainly-
I'm just
I'm
saying,
okay with it.
yeah, I just didn't.
You're okay.
Yeah.
So,
I read it. And finance was okay with it. So,
so we're okay with it in its current form then? Okay, so we'll go ahead and start voting on it then. So this will be Article
I'm sorry, what do you want to
14.
do about section 2.3? Do we want to
I
leave
would-
section 2.3 as Mark requests, or do we want to delete section 2.3, which was Brian's suggestion?
I would have to default to the attorney on the decision with regard to a legal document, honestly, but that's just me.
So you guys are good with deleting section 2.3?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think Mark wasn't that bothered about it, was he? He didn't say there was any,
He just said he'd prefer to leave it in. But if, I follow your direction, so you tell me how you'd like to proceed.
does it make a difference?
I don't think it makes a difference, really.
Leave it in.
So I'm hitting delete. Okay.
Leave it in, then leave it in. If that's what they want. I've said all along it's their bylaw, so,
Well, I think-
Yeah, it doesn't hurt,
yeah, if
so-
it's theirs, it's theirs.
I think Brian's just trying to make it clean and
Cleaner, yeah,
concise.
it's fine. And he did shorten it by concise sentences and so forth, so just leave it in, then.
All right, so we're leaving it in?
Yep. Can't get any more blame
Okay, so done.
tonight.
Okay. So, is there a motion to place the replacement finance committee bylaw on the warrant?
So moved.
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Is there a motion to place the replacement finance committee bylaw on the warrant as Article 14?
So moved.
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Aye. Is there a recommendation on the finance committee bylaw?
Approval.
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Aye. Okay. The next article is for the town budget. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $6,701,732 or any other sum, and to further appropriate from the EMS receipts account the sum of $400,000 or any other sum, and to further appropriate from free cash the sum of $564,511 or any other sum, for a total appropriation of $7,666,243, or any other sum to defray the necessary and usual expenses of the several departments of the town for the fiscal year beginning on July 1st, 2023, and especially for any and all the items shown on the attached budget or act in any way thereon.
My current first number and last number are just different than yours, Julie?
No,
Okay.
can we just vote without those numbers in at this moment in time?
Yes.
I don't mind the source of the revenue, because that's going to stay the same.
Yeah.
But the total appropriation and the appropriated sum of, I would rather not have those numbers in.
Yep, and we can let those numbers
Yeah,
filter in as
filter in as the-
a
yes.
little closer.
Yep.
Yep. That's fine with me. Okay, so is there a motion to place this article without the final budget numbers on the warrant?
So moved.
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Aye. Is there a motion to place this article as Article 15 on the warrant?
So moved.
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Aye. Is there a motion for a recommendation?
Approval.
Second,
All in all in favor?
Aye.
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 And then just so you can see here, so I updated since before, are you guys okay with me then after the article, instead of throwing, as we talked about line item budget, then throwing in the line item budget?
Is
Just
that all what's going to be in the warrant?
that would be in the warrant, and then the full details are in the back. Because remember, we talked about voting line item budget, so this is the budget article, these are the line items. People would vote retirement assessment, $787,040, and then they would see that very detailed sheet at the back that everyone has. That's
Yep.
a 6-page, this piece. So all the backup will still be part of the document, it's just not in the middle of the warrant, because they're just voting on the bottom lines.
It's fine with me.
Yeah, that's,
Okay.
All right, the next one is for the Wachusett Regional School District budget. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $7,356,981. Do we want to leave the numbers out? Should I just not say these numbers?
Oh, yeah. We broke it out.
Certainly is easier for me to not say these numbers. All right, so to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum necessary to fund the school budget or any other sum, and to further appropriate from operating stabilization an additional sum for a total appropriation of whatever the school budget needs to pay its assessed share of the Wachusett Regional School District budget for the fiscal year beginning on July 1st, 2023, and thereby approve the district's budget for said fiscal year or act in any way thereon.
As long as it doesn't go above 7,400,000.
Yes.
Well,
As long as there's a
that
limit,
People
yeah.
will approve that,
No, it's not.
not knowing.
No, it's
Well,
not.
no,
It's
no, no,
gonna be there.
it'll be on there at the time that
Okay,
the,
Yeah.
so,
yeah.
okay.
It's just for the purposes of
You
putting
don't want
the
to be always sold
placeholder.
to something,
Okay.
yeah.
So just
Yeah.
for tonight, just as an exercise, I did put in here, just under the recommended side, you'll see what the difference is. So that's 4%. So I know there was a lot of discussion from FinCom, and I didn't know how the select board felt about whether or not they wanted to recommend the budget at the 4.19%, assuming there's no changes between now and when you sign, or if you wanted to recommend at the 4%, which was the recommended guidance that all the towns kind of got behind to the.
So you have
So-
to present the number that the school district gives you. You're required by law that you have to present that number, right?
And we've all said we're not going to defeat the budget, so we're going to support it.
Yeah.
So we can't,
Okay.
so,
Okay, well, I'm just showing you the difference in the numbers, so
Yeah.
you can decide how you wish to go.
We saw what happened to it, and there's another town nearby us that did basically what you're suggesting, and it was hellfire. So it didn't go well.
It's just, I mean, the only thing I would say is, just keep in mind that if you recommend anything that's not the full budget, then you're recommending disapproval of the
yeah,
budget.
that's what I just said. We just-
Right, well, exactly,
Yeah.
right, you can't,
Yeah.
you can't just pass a number, right, exactly,
And
so,
we will be, if nothing happens between now and the town meeting, which I don't think will, we're going to be voting on that full amount. We know that,
yeah,
correct?
right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll update that. I just wanted to leave that in the chart so you guys could see the difference.
Yeah, no, I appreciate seeing
And
the
I don't
difference,
think anything will
definitely.
happen. I think we're wishing that it will, but I don't think anything will. If the towns are behind that budget, then why would they reduce it?
I tend to be overly optimistic. All right, so, is there a motion to place the Wachusett Regional School District article on the warrant?
So moved.
Second,
All in favor? Aye.
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 Is there a motion to place the Wachusett Regional School District budget article as Article 16 on the warrant?
So moved.
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
aye.
And is there a recommendation, motion for recommendation?
Approval.
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so Article 18 is for Bay Path's budget, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, I don't think this is gonna change, the sum of $498,964 to pay its assessed share of the Bay Path Regional Technical School budget for the fiscal year beginning on July 1st, 2023, or act in any way thereon. Is there a motion to place the Bay Path budget article on the warrant?
So moved.
second,
All in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Is there a motion to place the Bay Path warrant article as Article 17 on the budget?
So moved.
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Is there a motion for a recommendation?
Approval.
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Aye. Is there a motion to close the warrant?
So moved.
I mean, second, I think we're supposed to say a motion to close the warrant. Second,
Make a motion to close the warrant?
Thank you. Second.
second, all in favor?
On the parking permit. Put in the articles or as a sign, how much the fine is, where they're gonna store the cars, or wherever they move them,
Yep. So
and is it going up a bid?
that's a fantastic question, and I think we'll probably get some direction from legal once that article goes to legal as to what additional items might need to be included.
Town meeting asking the question.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's a good consideration.
So no fine, Jack. They're just gonna relocate your car for you someplace.
I don't know if it is in any West Boylston.
Okay, I'll make that note.
Okay, so we have a pending vote to close the warrant. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, the warrant is closed.
Okay.
All right. So we have a vote to increase the recreation revolving account for FY '23 from 120,000 to 200,000. But I just want to comment, because I think on the warrant, it said 250, didn't it?
Yeah, it did for next year. So right now, this year, I talked to
So it's just for this
Larissa
year.
again today. So our spending is currently, is this the most updated one? This was as of March 31st, so this one should be relatively up to date. We had expended, let's see, I want to say just over $100,000. And I think we had up to 150, but they're just getting into the summer program's gonna start picking up for payment ahead of time, and we're gonna have that before we close the fiscal year.
Okay.
So Larissa just wants to make sure we cover ourselves and we have enough leeway that they can continue paying their expenses, just in case. So next year, we chose an even higher number because we anticipate the programs will continue to grow.
Okay. So it's just, long story short, this is just what we need for now.
Yeah.
Okay.
And FinCom still needs to vote the same.
Okay. So, is there a motion to increase the recreation revolving account from 120,000 to 200,000?
Make a motion to increase the recreation revolving account for FY '23 from 120 to 200,000.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And thank you for adding the FY '23 on there. That was important. All right. That concludes all of our open session. I again neglected to state at the beginning of the meeting that we will be moving into executive session. We have 2 items to discuss on executive session. One of them is to approve the meeting minutes from the prior executive session meeting held on March 27th. Following that, I will be recusing myself. Just make that abundantly clear.
Which you never have done in the past.
I will be recusing myself because the next item is to discuss the personnel contract for the fire chief pursuant to MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21-3. So, I am going to participate in the vote to move into executive session, but let the minutes reflect that I will be recusing myself for the second item. I will not even be in the building for that.
And I'll close the meeting. I'll reopen the
And you
public
can,
meeting. to
yeah,
close it.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. So, at this time, I will entertain a motion to move into executive session. This needs to be a roll call vote.
So moved.
And then only to return to regular session to adjourn the meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, Kirk?
Aye.
Carol?
Aye.
And I vote aye. And so we are in executive session, and we'll have a little break here to
2-minute break.
let everybody do
Follow
what
you.
they need to do.